I've been, as I say, banging a drum for quite a while at this point. I think supports are in a horrible state in Overwatch, and I think it's mostly 5v5's fault, needless to say. I think there is quite a lot of stuff that just needs to happen in 5v5 that leads you down a path to this natural place, which is an overabundance of reliance on cooldown structures, which are the most annoying part of supports, because cooldowns tend to override stuff instead of augmenting stuff. I feel like the main context that you get in these games, the main thing that's even interesting in these games in the first place, this hero-based shooter genre, is supports being able to augment duels, not override them, but augment them in interesting and fun ways. And when support's ability to be able to do that is reduced to a certain degree, not only do you make it so that other characters have a long time to return to the fight after they get chipped out, but you make it so that the duels that happen in the game tend to be a lot more one note, one health bar against one health bar, one set of cooldowns against one set of cooldowns, instead of one smaller health bar that can be burst through, having some sort of augmenting healing on top of that. The reason why I think this has happened is pretty damn simple. 5v5 forced a lot more duels to resolve a lot more quickly, and when duels resolve quickly, and if they don't resolve quickly, for instance, if a bull jumps a Widowmaker and the Widowmaker's getting healed by a Mercy, if that Mercy survives, the Winston's in a terrible spot, quite frankly, because he is a third of the team instead of 1/6 of the team, and his entire team's likely to die in the meantime while the enemy tank trades. This is a fundamental feature in my mind of the non-unilateral format, with characters being different sizes, with tank being bigger in general. So essentially, 5v5 is a format that really can't handle in-depth space control from quite a lot of people without the duels resulting in the death of somebody, and they were having a lot of trouble with some reliable resources, and when I say reliable resource, I'll define that in a bit, overriding duels. And I think people really don't understand this as a function of support, because Overwatch 2 just doesn't have it. Rivals doesn't have it. There is a difference between a Harmony Orb and an Ana gun. Very simple. There's a difference between a Mercy Beam and an Ana gun. I've talked about this before. A Mercy Beam has infinite attention to be on the right target. She can lock around while she's healing. She can go exactly the moment it's required, instantaneously onto the target and start healing. There's no reload. There's no time to acquire. There is an instant swap to the correct target. And that is what we call reliability. Whereas with Ana, you not only have travel time for the bullet, you have time between bullets where she won't be healing. You have a scope that reduces her situational awareness of who should be healed, hip fire that's a projectile. You have loads of different things that are, and the healing's not even instant. The healing goes over time and pumps in after a little bit of time. There's a load of different things that essentially change from a healer that is allowed a lot of numbers, right? Ana's allowed a lot of numbers because essentially Ana has a lot of skill input into being able to get the numbers where they're supposed to go, and so the effective healing, despite the fact that Mercy has a lower healing numbers, is about the same. I think this was misunderstood for all of Overwatch 1. Not that people didn't really understand that these characters were different and then these characters were balanced differently, but because people were saying things about Mercy like Mercy is a triage healer. I think a lot of people have heard that term, triage healer, and triage healer in my mind was a terrible word for it, because Mercy was never a triage healer. Mercy was a healer that converted reliability into pressure, and now pressure is this word that is essentially the idea of forcing the enemy team to do certain things that they do not want to do, including moving cooldowns, other things like that. Pressure is this all-encompassing, really important thing to have defined in Overwatch. Is kind of like the most important term. Essentially, the role of any healer is turn your resources into pressure on the enemy team. Now, Mercy has the most reliable healing, so the way that they turned their healing into pressure was being reliable with their healing. And you can do different things with that than you can do with non-reliable healing. For instance, if a Genji or an Ashe knows they are going to be healed instantly, they do not have to unpeak an angle, and they can continuously peak the angle. If a Tracer has a Harmony Orb, giving them the set amount of healing per second, there is a certain amount of their health bar that allows them to be able to weave in and out of cover without getting a health pack. They don't even try and get that health pack. There is a bonus to reliability, which means the DPS player can rely on that resource being there. It's not in any way related to the application of the numbers, but it's related to the way the psychology of the player works and the ways they can plan around that resource, which allows them to get more pressure out of these resources. So these very reliable resources always help the DPS. These very throughputy or unreliable resources generally require a lot more skill input from the player in particular. And also, I forgot earlier, Ana naturally can't shoot through shields, can't shoot round corners. That's some pretty big problems with Ana's healing mode. And Ana can't move very fast in order to change her sightline. So there's some more limitations to Ana's healing that make it very difficult for Ana to be able to heal a Tracer across the map, especially not reliably. The Tracer's going to have to go get a health pack if they're in the enemy team's backline. And they got Harmony Orb on them. Sure as hell doesn't need to happen. So we're in this situation where we have reliability versus throughput. These kind of like types of healing generated pressure on the enemy team in very different ways. One was a bulk resource that could generate their ult fast and be able to churn through numbers. The other one just allowed the DPS. So it's really a tank or a burst focus resource from Ana versus a DPS or a longer term reliable focus resource from Mercy. So these two things kind of existed. Then we went to Overwatch 2. Now, Overwatch 2 removed the tank, and the tank that was left over kind of needed to be able to jump at a angle, as I said with the Widow, and be able to kill the Widow. If the tank can't kill the Widow, that shit's kind of fucked, right? Now, the tank can shut out Ana. The tank can shut out these non-reliable healing sources. But with these reliable ones, with Break Pack and other stuff like that, it's a little bit problematic. If the tank heats himself at an angle and they get a bit of peel, they basically wasted all their time, and that kind of sucks. So we had to do something there, and obviously what we did was eventually is the DPS passive to make tanks' jobs feel better. The other reason why we did the DPS passive, and when I say DPS passive, I mean the healing reduction passive, and the additional stuff, which is the increased health bars for tanks, the increased armor reduction, it went from 5 to 7 per bullet for tanks, is because tanks, in addition to this, we cannot have these large levels of reliable healing in the game. They needed to be able to have enough resources to be able to do stuff. Now, if we slow down the resources in the game, first off, we didn't want to be able to nerf supports. We didn't want to nerf the numbers in general. That just feels bad for the support, so the Cauterize effect makes more sense. And second off, the extra resources on the tanks give them admittedly a lot more independence in the 5v5 format, because you want to be able to, in and of yourself, save resources, then go do something. If you are continuously net negative, it's very hard to do anything unless you've got a lot of independence yourself. So we've untied people from throughput resources by making it so that the tank, while they're active, more or less doesn't care about taking throughput resources. So we fucked the Mercy side of it and the way that they had skill expression based off healing, which was being reliable, and we screwed up the Ana side of it, which is the way they had skill expression based off healing, which was consistent pressure put onto the tanks. Now, admittedly, that wasn't very skillful. That was one of the more boring parts of the game for many people. But in my opinion, especially given Rivals, given the amount of Rocket Raccoon players in the backline in Rivals, and by the way, this is all off my head, I don't have any notes here, the amount of Rocket Raccoon players that are sitting in the backline holding right click and pressing Q, this is a very demanded playstyle by the majority of players, right? Obviously, people like being able to DPS on Ana, people like being able to DPS on supports in general, but there's a lot of arguments to say that supports had to heal a lot more in 6v6, and I just find these ring so completely hollow for the basic reason, and it's a very basic reason, that there wasn't a single coach in the history of Overwatch 1 and 6v6 that didn't always tell people to go and DPS, right? That was the way you always carried regardless of the rank. It was always better to be constantly active DPSing, and yet I feel like you should not be able to provide a consistent net positive output. Think a burst where small time it allows a net positive under pressure is fine, but once those resources are gone, it should always result in a net negative. So yes, Squeed, that is the current 5v5 format. I disagree with you, to be clear. I disagree with you. The reason why I disagree with you is I feel like under light pressure and chip damage, a Mercy in a spot where they are healing, for instance, an Ashe on a high ground, should be able to keep that Ashe more or less consistently active unless somebody does something about the Ashe. If somebody does not do something about the Ashe, such as doing a substantial chip damage, basically, Ashe is this character that I think should be able to continuously re-peak an angle. Uptime is very important for these games, and while I do not think that Ashe, if they're trading with somebody else, should be able to continuously peak that person, certainly that should be a bad option for the Ashe, even if they are being healed by a Mercy. They should be able to do a substantial amount more pressure by being healed in that angle. Now, what we have in Overwatch 2 is the second thing you talked about, Squeed, which is cooldown, focus, sustain. So cooldown, focus, net positive healing. Now, we have Suzu, we have Lamp, we have BAP Shift, we have Moira Orb, we have all of this bullshit, we have Nade. All of these things are cooldown, focus, net positive healing. So this cooldown, focus, net positive healing is one of those that it is fine, right? I understand the importance of cooldown focus net positive healing, and in the 6v6 format, cooldown focus net positive healing was used in order to be able to force your Reinhardt or your Winston or other things like that into the enemy team in ways they could not do otherwise, because they had this smaller resource pool and therefore they needed this constant big resource at the same time. This was an extra teamwork aspect of them. Now, without that, without this Winston needing these extra resources, because they're more independent, because they have higher armor protection, they have higher health bars in and of themselves, and because these big bursts are going to do less on them because they have this net negative healing system, even though it is about neutral when you throw in all your resources after Season 9, and that 30%, for instance, a nade with 30% healing reduction is just a little bit net positive if a Winston goes really deep, for instance, in 6v6. Now we're in a situation where these resources, this nade, this lamp, all of these burst options from the support are less often used for that purpose, to be used as a reinforcement to pressure, because they're not demanded there. They don't need these in order to do it, and instead they're being used to peel all the time. So we've gone from this system where you had a kind of like layered system where there was healing of different levels that affected characters in different ways, and now we've gone to a system, and this was introduced over time. Obviously this was screwing up in Overwatch 1 and continued to get worse over time, where there were more of these big override cooldowns, like Suzu in the game. Lamp was really bad late stage Overwatch 1, but we had all these override type systems. Now, what was worse in my mind? What was worse between a Mercy healing a Hanzo in an angle versus a Kiriko TPing to that angle, instantly Suzuing when you do get on them? I feel like the Override version is a lot less healthy. And the worst part about the Override version being a lot less healthy is that kind of is all that exists now. The skill expression for reliable healing and being in the right place at the right time and doing triage healing or instant healing or being able to allow a tracer to be constantly active is basically gone. The flanker passive for the increased healing from health packs have basically replaced all the reliability, the need for reliable sources. So things like Wu Yang's right click passive does significantly less now, and we're in a state where duels are not being augmented by healing. That's the fundamental. Duels are not being augmented by healing. They're being completely and utterly overrode by healing. And that's obvious from the history. That's obvious from the reasons we got here in the first place, the actual necessity of the 5v5 format in different situations. For most flankers, a small health pack usually gave them a full heal. That passive feels like such a joke. I'm talking about characters like Reaper that still got significant bonuses from health pack. I'm talking about characters as well like Soldier. Obviously, regardless of whether the health pack, the healing becoming a mega basically actually matters, not so much. But I do still think that these characters are much more reliant on health packs than they are reliant on individual healing. Like, obviously, I don't think anyone's going to question whether the game is much more solo focused and duel based and independent, and I don't think anyone's going to question that the game is a lot more solo skill based. It's a lot less about the context provided by different abilities in the game and your understanding of these systems and your ability to be able to operate within these systems, and instead it's about forcing a Suzu. Sure, forcing a Suzu is skill-based. Forcing a Suzu, it does require you to have some planning and other things like that, but it doesn't require you to exist within a framework of different levels of healing and operate differently in every single duel based on how much pressure is on you, based on the more people on the map and the more healing on the map and all of these things. And it just basically requires you to be able to pilot yourself around health packs and terrain and do the duel. Obviously, this is the 5v5 model. I'm not saying it's necessarily exclusively bad. I see the positives of the 5v5 model of healing. But the reality is all of the healers in the game have lost so much skill expression in general. It's just gone. So that's what I want to say about healers. And I do think healing in Overwatch is possibly in the worst state it has been since launch. That there is just so many override abilities in the game. There's so many Suzus, there's so many lamps, there's so much that just turns you off in a duel. Anyway, so support's tricky to design, support's shooter game design. Personally, I don't think supports are tricky to design. I think the supports are relatively easy to design in the grand scheme of things. I think that tanks are significantly harder to design than supports. I think the systems that supports live in, these ecosystems, is hard to make healthy. Well, at least it's maybe not hard to make healthy. I certainly think that I could do it quite easily, and Overwatch 1 did it quite easily. But clearly it's easy to screw up because every single game in the genre appears to be screwing it up at the moment. Let's go. Just so you know, this is Some Phoenix, 2.3k subscribers. This has like 6k views 2 weeks ago.
Gmail.
Highly recommended to me.
Will I get any replies? We'll see. You can stick around to the end if you want to hear more about that. The support role, as we know it in the hero shooter genre today, has had a storied history, with lots of ups and downs again. The release of characters like...
Saying that Rocket Raccoon is a down is such an interesting thing to say, because I think that the majority of design... The trouble with Raccoons are like the lowest common denominator design, and Rivals basically replaced an interesting ultimate with its damage boost originally with a sustain ultimate. And they also made it so that his gun was less usable in niche case scenarios aggressively. It's so funny the cleansing of Rivals over the early years, over the early year, I should say, not years, as people realized that we could make alternate playstyles such as Rocket Raccoon being aggressive and Jeff being a flanker. The way that the devs basically reacted to that by saying, no, you fucking don't, and just turning it off. It is so crazy.
Baptiste in Overwatch.
Didn't you call Rocket a 3 out of 10 your Rivals video? Rocket, that was after the changes, Luna. That was after the gun had been tuned down, or the movement. I think it's a movement that got tuned down, and the ult got turned into a sustain ult.
Which was met with notable amounts of controversy, and to this day, the game's supports remain a point of contention within the game's community.
I mean, the game supports remain a point of contention. I think most people are very happy with the state of supports. You can talk about Jetpack Cat, sometimes something different. I don't consider them a support. I consider them an abomination.
Then in Marvel Rivals, the support ultimates and triple support have been a sticking point for a lot of people almost since the game's release. And
yeah, but that's just because Rivals' support economy or healing economy is 100% attention based. So if you put 3 people that could have attention on preventing somebody die, because the moment you look at someone they have infinite health, then people tend to not die regardless. And the trouble with Rivals is they've had to move up lethality and pressure and sharpness in their game to such a ludicrous degree to kind of like respond to that. Oh, Jesus.
Examples are just scratching the surface of the problems these two different communities had and continue to have with their respective games as support roles. Indeed, even with the genre being around for so long, it's quite clear that the developers
I don't have a problem with support role. I have a problem with 5v5, the things that it demands, and I have a problem with Season 9.
Haven't ironed out all the kinks when it comes to the design of their support characters. If you've played Overwatch or Marvel Rivals for any amount of time, it's very likely that you yourself have taken a look at these games as support characters once or twice and thought to yourself that something just didn't feel quite right.
No, I haven't. Yes, I have, but it's interesting. Sure.
Maybe you found them dull. Or maybe...
No. Rivals is dull for the reason that it is designed to be dull. Calling them dull, I guess it's not an insult.
Maybe you found them lame to play with and around.
It's interesting there that they're comparing the two, because Overwatch supports are so much different than Rival supports. Overwatch supports basically are completely useless unless they're used aggressively.
I know, I certainly did. Hell, that's why I started my YouTube channel to begin with. In my opinion, the design of the supports in Marvel Rivals leaves a lot to be desired.
Yeah, well, you're looking at you're looking at the pig feed and the trough and being like, man, that's not a steak dinner. And I'm like, it's probably not designed to be a steak dinner, though.
While I have found a lot more to appreciate as I've played the game more, several of the things that were bugging me have only continued to get on my nerves.
They're on purpose.
Hence why I've gotten back into Overwatch with the release of their Season 1 update. It's been nice to immerse myself in a different take on the genre after so long spent pretty much only playing Rivals, and I was eager to play support in this game in particular. I already knew that Overwatch had its own problems, of course, but still, anything seemed better than Rivals' support problem.
I am genuinely curious what this guy heard was Overwatch's support problem before getting back into Overwatch. That sounds really interesting if he just says.
At the time. Though after playing it again for a good few dozen hours, I found something that surprised me. Once we get into this, I'm sure this won't come as a shock to any of you who've played more Overwatch than me, but Overwatch's supports have more or less the exact opposite problems as the ones in Rivals.
Sure.
This got me thinking
Rivals has infinite sustain, Overwatch has a net negative.
about the game design behind the support characters we know today. And having thought about it, I think the support role, more so than the others, outlines a lot of very interesting things within the genre.
Yeah, of course it does. Support is the most interesting of the roles. Support and tank is what makes the context that the gameplay is around. It's crazy that developers somehow seem to not understand this, especially with the non-centering of the tank role in their games and the lack of actual heroes they release for the tank roles, such as how Rivals did that. But realistically, the whole basis and the context with which you play the game, all the augmentations that make the game interesting are to do with space. And if you don't have continuous healing, which is the fundamental source of sustained space, and tanks that can take away sustained space in the game, you don't really have any context that allows the game to make their maps matter. And if the maps don't matter, then the game becomes boring.
So, to sort of honor the 1-year anniversary of the channel and of the first video I ever made, I want to talk about the support role. And my
Congratulations,
hope is that I
happy
can
birthday.
give you all a better idea of why the support characters in the most popular hero shooters today just don't feel quite right. Our focus will primarily be on Overwatch and Marvel Rivals, but I want to start by talking about an older game, because it'll help us understand why developers are even bothering with the support role even when nobody can seem to get it right, and it will also show us where a lot of common design decisions partly originated from.
Sure, Team Defense Fort 2.
The game in question is Team Fortress 2, which remains an incredibly influential game to this day. Its diverse cast of characters who all play completely differently from each other went on to inspire
TF2 Medic round 2. I'm gonna try and hold off on TF2 Medic because I really riled up the bees last time I talked about it. TF2 Medic is interesting design for its time, but not very inspiring for the time now. It also completely unbalances TF2 around 1 out of 9 classes, which is like in terms of support. See what I said about these games and how the healing system gives space, and the tanking system gives space relevance because space can be held in a manner and took away in a manner, right? That's the fundamental of this genre. Just having medic, it's kind of
what we now think of as the hero shooter genre, and you can still find bits and pieces of its DNA in nearly every game.
And that's not necessarily a medic problem. That's kind of like a TF2 problem.
Game that carries that mantle. One character in particular sticks out, though.
Again, it's very hard to call the medic problematic when the healing system in TF2 is the problematic thing, right? If I could turn a medic into an Overwatch character instead, right, just replace kind of like Mercy with medic, and then kids, like, sure, it would be more boring. Mercy's in my opinion, a more interesting version of medic, though medic fulfills a role in their game. It'd probably be fine. It would be fine or interesting, right? It's not a medic problem. It's a TF2 problem. It's the lack of interesting initiation in the game. It's the lack of burst healing and burst healing mattering in the game. It's a lack of context on the space in the game that is the problem. It's a system. It's not the hero necessarily.
And that's the medic. In an already diverse cast, the medic sets himself apart, offering a gameplay loop that is completely different from TF2's other mercenaries in a pretty fundamental way. The medic rarely, if ever, gets to shoot the enemies in this competitive shooter game. Instead,
It's not a competitive shooter game. It's a hero-based shooter game. It's different. It started the genre, right? And this is closer to that than anything else. I remember there was I don't remember what it was called, but it was a random game that Total Biscuit reviewed that was towards the start of this genre, which was like bad superheroes, and that there was a class-based shooter kind of game, but it didn't have healing and it didn't have tanking, and it was a free-for-all, and it was terrible because of it. Basically, like this was the start of the hero-based shooter. Like, if the hero-based shooter doesn't have tanks and it doesn't have supports, then it's not a hero-based shooter in my mind. It's just a shooter game. Lawbreakers, I think it was that. Yeah. It's very interesting seeing the history of these games. Overwatch was the first one that really explored the idea of support in an interesting enough manner. Not that there are not bad things that you can do in the genre. Like, obviously there are problems, but yeah, I feel like TF2 is much closer to an arena-based shooter than it is a hero-based shooter, if you get what I mean, in the common parlance these days.
Play is entirely built around supporting his team. The medic has virtually no way to make aggressive plays or engage the enemy in combat by himself. instead focusing on healing and buffing his teammates to better allow them to shine. There's a lot we can learn from very quickly breaking down the medic and his design, so bear with me while I do just that.
Oh no.
The medic is completely defined by his powerful utility options and his near-complete lack of offensive tools.
Of course.
His main means of supporting his team is his medigun, which is a single-target, auto-targeting heal that also provides temporary overhealth to allies.
Which is a bad mechanic, by the way, for a pretty obvious reason, that the interactions between characters are designed to be that way for a reason. And if you start augmenting things like fundamental health pools, that gets pretty bad pretty quickly. So if you have reliable healing, for instance, Mercy has reliable healing, instant cast healing, goes through shields, goes through anything, goes around corners, etc. Constant ability to be able to look around and click on people. That reliable healing is really problematic, especially on things like snipers, if you can't burst through that healing, right? If you can't jump them with a Winston and kill them through the healing, if you can't duel them with a Genji and right click their head and kill them through that healing. So barreling in over health with reliable healing is possibly the least thoughtful combination I've ever seen. This is bad design. If it was on Anna, for instance, and this healing was fundamentally non-reliable, right, that would be a fine design, because you can give a tank additional overhealth. It doesn't really change the mechanics with that tank. So, like, this is the answer behind overhealth. Overhealth is bad because this is the wrong type of healing. This is the wrong mechanic for that overhealth to sit on top of.
Already at max HP. By healing his allies, the medic also builds Uber, which can be used to apply a powerful single-target buff to one of his allies depending on which medigun he has equipped. If you're more familiar with modern examples of the genre, you can think of that as his ultimate.
The Hornet's Nest is being angered. I think that's pretty obvious, especially given my spiel earlier about reliability versus throughput. I think that should be pretty obvious to anyone.
Beyond gambling on a random critical hit with his melee, or slow, long-range burst damage with the Crusader's crossbow, the medic has no way to play aggressively himself, and this wasn't done for no reason. There are two big reasons for the medic's kit to be set up this way. The first and most commonly cited one being balance. Here's the thing about healing. It's really strong, and this is for a pretty...
No, it isn't. It's exactly as strong as you make the HPS.
Simple reason. Very basically, in order to win, you need to do things.
Yes, continuously being able to be active is very strong. Obviously, when we're talking about healing in general, yeah, healing is a strong mechanic. If you have a team with no healing and a team with healing, the team with healing is going to exist. But I prefer to think of it not as strong because of that, but as necessary, right? Completely necessary.
The list of things the player can do is directly tied to how much health they have. The more health you have, the more things you can do to contribute to victory. The amount of things you can do goes down as your health goes down, all the way up until you're dead and you can't do anything at all. Healing allows you to stay at high health for longer, which means you can do more things for longer. And the more things you're doing, the more you're contributing to victory.
Yes, and so the reason why overhealth is a bad mechanic on medic in particular is because overhealth allows you to do the things that you need to do so reliably and stops any counterplay for the enemy for stopping you doing that thing, right? The idea is to allow you to be more active on the map and continuously operate with the reliable healing, but not allow you to override duels or fights or other things like that. For instance, if Medigun had a instant cast 100 health heal on it, looks at camera, it would be a worse version of the Medigun. Does everyone agree with that? Anyone disagree with that? I'm happy to talk to you. One agree? Anyone else in chat? Put it down in the comments below if you disagree with that statement. He's now just explaining pressure without saying pressure? Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. There's not enough humans here. Nobody's agreeing with me. Oh god, what's the point of having a platform? Yes, no, maybe? Shithead. I don't know. Thank you for your input, MK.
For longer. And the more things you're doing, the more you're contributing to victory. The medic even takes this one step further by providing...
I zoned out during the question. That's because of my dulcet tones. That's the problem.
...his allies with overhealth, increasing their HP beyond their normal maximum, and thus increasing the amount of things they can do beyond what they're normally capable of. Here, the idea behind the medic's limited offensive options is pretty simple. If the medic is allowing everyone on his team to contribute more to victory by keeping them all alive, then letting him contribute directly to combat on top of that would probably make him the best class in the game, and it wouldn't be close.
No, it makes a certain amount of medics on your team necessary while giving the medics a chance at being able to do so, right? If I had a team of six medics, would it be better? If I have a team of 4 medics, would it be better? No, their healing is just fundamentally a thing that you need in a certain quantity to be able to keep your team generally active during the game, and that is valuable, but more stacked on top of it isn't necessarily better, right? So when you say, oh well, medics should be able to DPS at the same time, if you do intend to do that in the future, my counter argument is going to be, well, what happens when you have 6 medics, right? Should the medic have some sort of ability to be able to generally do things independently? And the answer is maybe. I don't know. It depends how many medics I have to create. If I have to create 1 of them, probably not. If I have to create 10 of them for my video game, the answer is I'm going to start running out of ideas of what to do with the character that can't DPS pretty damn fast, and there's a lot more context capable of being provided to the game by these characters that can do aggressive things, so I should be occupying all the different types of design space with my characters and allowing them to do the most interesting stuff.
In, say, a 6v6 environment, you could probably get away with running...
Don't you find it curious that half of Metaguns unlocks nerf the overhealth provided? It's almost like the devs knew it wasn't that good of an idea. Oh, 100%.
2 or 3 medics and be just fine.
Vaccinate A,
The second and less cited reason has more to do with the transition away from TF2's predecessor to the game we know today. The classes in Team Fortress Classic have a lot of overlap with each other, and the TFC medic is a big example of this. He's far from the supportive character we know today, instead being a sort of hybrid offensive and utility character. There's nothing wrong with that, but he's also not as special, and he's not the only example of overlap in TFC's roster. In designing TF2, I believe it became a priority to make sure every class offered a unique gameplay experience, and the medic's ability to heal was what his identity was shifted into.
Sure, but we can't have all of our supportive identities being to heal, because that's a little bit one-dimensional.
TFC medic was more of a combat class. People found a lot of appeal in focusing on healing your team and helping them to succeed. And
there's also the idea of the hybrid tax that people kind of worked out from World of Warcraft. If you have a character that can do damage and do healing, obviously in a raw numbers game like World of Warcraft, you kind of have to allow them to be able to do both at 100%. If they can do both. In classic WoW, there was a massive tax paid by any class that could do all of the things, because naturally it was thought, right, Swiss Army knife probably shouldn't be best at everything. And you have to be careful about that balance. But in these active games where you can only realistically do one thing at one time, and you can do all of your healing or all of your damage at different times, most of the time you probably should be balancing this guy to be like 90% good at healing and 90% good at DPS compared to 100% DPS characters.
This unique gameplay loop was what the TF2 Medics class was built around.
And I think that's quite a controversial opinion. I think there's going to be quite a bit of pushback at that, but I really do believe it that it is absolutely fine for Kiriko to be almost as good as a duelist as other characters that are in the DPS category, because the DPS should be better while supported by a Kiriko than a Kiriko would be supported by a Kiriko, right? The idea that you have something more important to be doing than dueling somebody is pretty much good enough. And not in even into that duel, I feel that DPS should still have a basal advantage, but you know.
So in limiting his
and yes, we want wide and interesting design. So why wouldn't a couple of them be good duelists?
Of options, the devs effectively force the player to engage with the unique gameplay loop the class provides. That unique gameplay loop is something we'll be talking about a lot. The medic really does play nothing.
The whole conversation's being framed around the medic. Oh no!
Like his fellow mercenaries, for better and for worse. TF2 helped introduce...
And the fact that Medic plays nothing like his fellow mercenaries, apart from, like, Spy, which is also that diverse, is pretty much just because that is the first exploration of the healing design space.
The genre, the idea that there are multiple ways for someone to engage with a game like this. At a higher level of play, the player is engaging very actively with almost all of the game's systems. But on a more casual level, people are likely to gravitate to experiences that appeal to them, and play characters that allow them to engage with those experiences.
It's Hanamura, yeah.
This being a shooter game, a lot of people are going to gravitate to things like direct combat, raw aiming skill, and aggressive playmaking, and play.
Which is always an interesting thing for me, that this idea that because it's a shooter game, characters will be drawn to the shooting mechanics. I don't think that's necessarily true. I think a lot of people are gravitating towards the healing mechanics, and I think people don't gravitate towards medic as much in TF2 compared to an Overwatch, where the support class is pretty much as interesting as the DPS class and has the same amount of players. Is simply because the TF2 didn't explore the archetype of supporting very well, and there was simply a bigger demand than the amount of characters in the game to the team, based on just general team comps that do work well. So you have this kind of like effect where once you explore this and you do get this, just because they're guns in the game doesn't mean everyone wants to shoot people. People do as time goes on, and yeah, sure, when people first got into TF2, they would be a bit more shooty because they're not really experienced in the genre, but as the genre develops, there's a lot more people that are solo exclusive supporters, and I do think that there hasn't been enough of a community fostered by the tank community, simply because it hasn't been treated very well or very interestingly in the last couple of years by any game. So the actual community of hardcore tank mains is relatively low compared to the supportive community.
Characters that allow them to focus on those things. But there are people...
When I first started Overwatch, I was overjoyed to see Mercy and Moira, because they let me exist without a skill I thought I strongly lacked, 100%.
To whom that doesn't hold their interest. Instead, these people may enjoy trying their hardest at things like positioning, cooldown management, movement, and planning, and that's exactly what the medic is going for, with no obligation to...
Positioning, cooldown, yeah. Okay, I kind of understand what you mean. The reason why medic's relatively boring is because there really isn't that much skill distribution based off these things, right? Like, medic doesn't really care if they position perfectly. Medic cares whether they're relatively safe. Mercy cares whether they position perfectly because they have an additional skill in res that requires positional-based awareness, and because the character is, well, used to be a lot more HPS per unit of health for the characters in the game compared to medic on quite a few of them. Therefore, they need to be constantly swapping between people, and because there is more tanking and a better, healthy hero-based shooter ecosystem within the game that allows people to have these building and breaking cycles where people set up really, really good position, and that matters because you're healing them and they can use that position well, and people can break it with throwing a Winston at it, right?
Aim or engage in direct combat himself, the medic offers a far more relaxed and cerebral experience than the more twitchy direct combat classes, who are a lot more about reaction times and instinct, which has a lot of appeal to a lot of people. On the other side of that coin, though, the medic holds virtually no appeal to the kind of person who wants to engage with things like aiming and aggressive playmaking.
Yeah, which I hopefully you'll allow me to say is why the more hybrid style of support is more interesting to me. I think Ana's pretty much the... I think there's a reason why Ana's play rate is always one of the highest out of the support category in Overwatch, no matter what their win rate is.
For a long time, that was most players. Even for someone who wants to engage with things besides direct combat, the medic leaves a lot to be desired, and here's where we get into his big problems. While the medic can provide a fun, different gameplay experience, he can also be alternately boring and frustrating depending on the quality of the match he finds himself in. While the medic is clearly trying to offer something to the crowd that likes engaging with things like cooldown management, movement, etc. over direct combat or aiming, the medic's stock kit actually kind of struggles to provide these things. There's some movement you can do in healing a scout to gain movement speed, and you do have to build and know when to use your Uber, but besides that, the medic doesn't really have much going on.
Damn right. Yeah.
While healing is incredibly strong, it's hard to feel that impact while you're actually playing the medic, and this is a simple matter of feedback. Killing someone has very clear feedback. You see the opponent go from doing things to doing literally nothing. You feel in an instant that what you did has had an impact.
Yeah, I understand this kind of like feedback thing. I think that there are things that people enjoy more in games than having instantaneous feedback, and the hyperfixation on instantaneous feedback as an aspect of games is kind of like overwritten. They're like, oh, you're in a first-person shooter environment, so you must be here to click on things. And the answer is, no, people play Rocket League. People play World of Warcraft. People play other games that have no gameplay loop like this. Just because it is in a first-person genre does not mean that you have to make it just exclusively shooter mechanics and that people are innately driven by the things that people generally tend to be driven by in first-person shooters. It doesn't mean that you have to grow these audiences by having a healthy ecosystem there, but it doesn't mean that they are all driven by this stuff. People play fucking XCOM. They're idiots, but they exist, so you can do any type of gameplay you want that is generally satisfying in this genre, and it might be niche, but it's not necessarily worse than the simple intrinsic kind of like click people gameplay.
Impact on the game. But what feedback does healing have? You see your...
It doesn't really matter, right? Like, it doesn't really matter. People enjoy juggling, right? Juggling health bars, keeping them all active, keeping them all up. This is just an innate thing that people enjoy. The impact of it doesn't have to be felt. It is felt, in my opinion, in the success of people as you see them. And you probably have to have a little bit more understanding of the game before you're able to innately feel that. And maybe that's a problem. But realistically, it's got pretty much
ally
impact.
Stand there, and then they keep standing there. If you're observant, you can see your ally push forward or make a play they wouldn't have if you weren't there. But
for what is good, worth, Overwatch has achieved good feedback system for moment-to-moment healing. Yep, Overwatch has Mercy's healing beam going whoop as it goes higher. There's loads of different things.
Generally, it doesn't really feel like you're accomplishing anything most of the time.
And yes, Overwatch has tried really hard to make their feedback systems better. I don't think it's in and of itself, though.
It more so feels like you're maintaining
I don't think it's
the status
exclusively
quo.
necessary.
And moment to moment, the medic doesn't have much going on besides healing, which compounds with his lack of offensive tools to create a potentially extremely frustrating experience. His having to rely on his team is great for making the player engage with a unique gameplay experience, but if your allies don't know which end of the gun the bullets come out of, then no matter what you do, you're screwed.
This is one of those matchmaking problems. There's this whole thing of, well, what's the point in pocketing my DPS with damage boost? They're bad at the video game in low ranks. And the answer is, they're just as fucking bad as the people on the enemy team. So, proportionately, they're just as bad as anyone else. Yes, I understand there's problems with feedback due to inconsistency, but I think learning who is the most consistent person on your team is part of the fun.
The medic player has very little agency. He can help his
maybe
team do better and enable game-winning plays. He can always stand where he needs to be and always be healing the right guy, but it's still up to his team to secure the win. If his team isn't playing the game, the medic has no tools to carry them to victory.
Sure, yeah.
He can't kill high-value targets or make big plays by himself. This can be frustrating when you're sitting back...
Man, isn't the Uber Sword just ludicrously overpowered? Doesn't it do the same damage as the normal sword? Does it have no crits on it? I can't remember how it works. It was like 25% Uber charge last time I played, I'm pretty sure. I haven't played TF2 in a while, but that was ludicrous.
Killing your team and you see an opportunity that no one goes for. You know you could make it...
Not every character should have carryability, though, or am I being silly now? I think it's important to put some degree of things to do as mini-games on the character. For instance, as I said, movement reliance is very important. Some sort of skill scaling on the character is very important. I think quite a lot of the time people misunderstand how important, especially non-healer players, misunderstand how important or how rewarding it can be to be instantaneously there at people's health bar. Oh, there's the other thing that overhealth does badly. It removes the incentive to be instantly back to the target because you give them overhealth, so it actually reduces the reliance these people have on fast reaction times and the things that make reliable healing actually interesting. That's an interesting one. Yeah, overhealth is such a ridiculous mismatch, but still, yeah, I think there's important to have some systems in here, but I do think it's inherently rewarding.
Big difference if you were playing any other class, but you just have to stand by and hope your team takes that opportunity. And these issues are things that I think the devs were well aware of, because two of the medic's strongest unlockable weapons, the Crusader's crossbow and the Ubersaw, are designed to give the medic more to think about. And
well, it's more that there is very little to do with something that has little agency, right? If you got you get the medic, you're like, what else can I do to the medic? Well, we can make a gun that heals a bit faster, and it's like, okay, well, what interesting stuff can we do to the medic? Oh, we'll give him a bit of agency, I guess.
To encourage him to search...
You immediately find agency the moment you start doing other things.
Opportunities to get some damage in.
25% Uber charge per fucking swing. That's crazy, right?
The crossbow is a long-range option that either heals allies or damages enemies depending on who you hit, which encourages you to be on the lookout for injured allies.
Terrible. It's stupid to have a gun that instantly heals unreliably for peel amounts, for overriding dual amounts across the map. That is so stupid. That is ridiculous. That makes no sense whatsoever. The actual scaling on it is opposite of what it should be. And yes, it's very rewarding for the medic, but it's very unrewarding for the person that is dueling the person that just got healed. It is like making a character with a Suzu that is just on, like, only usable across the map. Would that be good, being able to use a Suzu every 3 or 4 seconds across the map? No, that's the opposite of good design. That's not good.
Lies in need of burst healing or
So not only is the gun bad, but the Crusader crossbow is also bad.
Enemies who you may be able to finish off, and the saw very simply gives you uber charge for hitting enemies, encouraging you to play more aggressively and to be on the lookout for opportunities to get a melee hit in. Isn't
the saw just straight power creep? Is there a downside to the saw? It does do crits and has the same damage. It's just straight power creep. Don't get me wrong. I think the saw is really interesting, and being able to melee to get uber charge is actually a very interesting mechanic. But at the same point,
it's much better. But you're still largely reliant on your team to set you up. If nobody wants to push into close quarters, then you're not likely to get any saw hits in. And if your team can't hit anything, then your crossbow's offensive capabilities are kind of moot. And all that is before we get into what is perhaps the most obvious source of frustration.
Yep.
The medic is priority number 1 for nearly every other class in the game. If someone on the enemy team is preventing their
source of frustration, also known as the actual gameplay loop, is it frustrating for people to be... Yeah, at a very low level, it's frustrating, but that's kind of like the video game.
Allies from dying, then you're naturally going to want to take them out early to make killing...
Oh, it's minus 25% swing speed, is it? Okay.
Everyone else easier.
I knew it had something
especially
negative on
so since the medic is almost defenseless by himself. This adds an extra layer of gameplay and decision-making that can add a lot to a team fight. But for the medic player, it means that you're going to be getting focused down a lot, and there isn't really much you can do about that. While the medic does have passive health regen, there is little he can do to protect himself more actively. He can try and position carefully, but even here he struggles to have agency. He needs to be wherever his team is,
Sure.
And if his team is trying to hold in an area where he's exposed, then what is the medic supposed to do?
Interesting that this guy appears to have wanted to criticize all forms. I wonder what his conclusions are going to be.
Not heal his team? Pretty much the only thing the
Not
medic
happy
can
about
do when
Rivals,
he's
Overwatch,
targeted
or
is gamble on a random crit with his melee or waste his uber charge to try and save his own life, neither of which are ideal. And all this doesn't help with that frustrating lack of independence the medic has. All this isn't to say he doesn't have his fans, but speaking as a support lover myself, the medic leaves a lot to be desired. When I was super into TF2, I gravitated to the Engineer, a support-oriented class who's far more active and does actually get to shoot people with his gun every now and again, and we'll get into how he makes that work in a moment. Nevertheless, there's an undeniable appeal to healing someone or buffing them up and watching them succeed.
Yep.
The idea has a lot of potential, and ever since the medic graced the battlefields of TF2, the developers who have made the hero shooter genre what we know it today have been struggling to make their support characters work. So
no, they haven't. They've been making support characters relatively successfully, in my mind.
With all that laid out, we can
struggling to make them work. You're laying it on a bit thick.
Better understand the decisions the more modern hero shooter developers have taken in regards to their support characters.
I mean, it's not the characters that are a problem for Rivals. It's the gameplay. The gameplay's just bad. And then you couldn't make a single... You couldn't design a support in Rivals that is good. There's no way to do it. They are all bad because the foundations are rotten.
Characters.
Oh no.
While Overwatch would be next in the timeline, I'm going to move on to talking about Marvel Rivals, because it has a lot more direct translations of the same concepts that we see in TF2.
Sure.
A lot of the same problems, some attempted solutions to those problems, and some all-new issues stemming in part from those...
It uninvented the wheel, one might say.
Solution. Speaking as someone who's talked about them several times, the supports in Rivals do have a lot more going on than I originally gave them credit for. Most of them...
Yeah, they got fuckloads of buttons, man. Yeah, just shove a couple more buttons onto them. I'm sure that'll create interesting gameplay if you just keep adding more buttons.
The issue with healing being their primary job, so they can struggle to feel impactful on the moment-to-moment level, but they have more going on besides to supplement that. If you enjoy putting your focus on cooldown management,
sure, yeah, healing is the primary job of people in Rivals that are in the support category, because if you're not instantly here to be able to heal somebody, they will die because the TTK in Rivals is very, very low.
Movement, etc., then Rivals has several characters who will likely hold a lot of appeal to you. When I feel like sweating my ass off playing this game, one of the characters I gravitate to is Cloak and Dagger, because
Mm, a Cloak and Dagger, sweating ass off character, opinion discarded, question mark.
rather than testing my ability to aim or crack off combos, they allow me to express my skill in positioning, cooldown management, and game sense.
Okay,
which
no
I
problem. Sure, why
find
not?
a lot more fun and interesting.
Cooldown management on Cloak and Dagger. Is it?
And other characters hold similar appeal.
Okay, yeah, Cloak and Dagger is. I'm being elitist.
Playing as Invisible Woman, there's mastery involved
What the fuck is this? Oh my god, Rivals is such slop. Look at this skin, man.
in knowing when to play closer to the front.
How am I meant to, as somebody on the other team, know that this is Invisible Woman? That is ludicrous. What are they doing?
To help stack damage on the front line with her primary and abilities, or figuring out
Come on.
how best to use her shield. At least before they nerfed her shield into uselessness because Invis players would shit themselves and cry over reverting the self-shield buff that literally nobody asked for and everybody hates, but
I have no idea why Invisible Woman and Rivals devs in general are babying their support community to such a ludicrous degree. Like, Overwatch's support community is basically, fuck you, use your cooldowns, right? Like, that's basically it. There's so much demand on the support. Use your cooldowns properly, DPS, okay? That's Overwatch's kid gloves for their support players. Rivals is like, oh, you sweet child, you're struggling to survive against the instant kill DPS that we keep buffing. Let's give you more. Oh, I'm so sorry. Yeah, I mean, the trouble with Rivals is there is no space control because there is so many flanks on the maps, and there is no reason to interact when you're not trying to kill something, because the moment they press a button, they're going to be immune to damage. Right? It's just incredibly sharp is the thing. Rivals support's more baby than Overwatch. Yeah, they have basically the same damage output as a DPS now. They keep buffing them.
that's besides the point. Even a character like Rocket, who I personally cannot stand playing, has some appeal if you enjoy using your mobility and map knowledge to be a little shit.
Yeah, and it had more appeal before they screwed him by making his gun basically unusable.
Rivals, we also see a potentially
Blizzard Babies supports too, Ralph. We buffed Kiri healing for 3 patches in a row, and supports got overbuffed because they couldn't take an angle in Overwatch 2. Agreed entirely. Yeah, there is a load of babying of supports. But however, I feel like the supports striking in Overwatch 2 when it got first released, by the way, this is like early on development if people don't know, was because they removed the stability in the game completely from 6v6, right? So it's kind of like a overcorrection for something that has slaughtered the majority of the player base. But, you know, currently I wouldn't consider buffing Kiri to be like babying support. It's just, at a certain point, it is just looking after their bottom line, right? The class of supports in Rivals gets babied, but individual characters always get babied no matter the game if they're the moneymakers.
very useful tool to have in a character-based game. A character having gameplay elements unique to them that gives the player more to chew on. We see this very clearly with the engineer in TF2. Building and managing a nest is unique and engaging, and occupies the player on the moment-to-moment level. But we can also see it in less dramatic ways.
There's a lot of space control in Rivals. Most of the player base doesn't interact with the space control, though. You only consistently see it in pro plays, fast scrims, and rarely the best lobbies on ladder. It's very simple why as well. Like, Rivals is such a sharp game that only at the highest levels is that sharpness turned down to such a degree that space control actually matters over being able to insta-kill people with duels and other stuff like that, right? There's so many things that are kill you before you override it with something else, and there's so many things that are just ultimate reliant in the game, and the general gameplay loop is just wait for ult, use ult still, even though and it's just poke down line. It's either all in and trying to insta-kill somebody, or wait for ult and poke for ult, which is just bad, obviously, but it's pretty obvious to see how space control only comes in at the high level there.
Like cycling your mark or your drones on Luna, Snow, or Ultron, or positioning so that your beam can do as much as possible at any given moment as Jeff.
Which I thought was quite interesting, to be clear. I think Jeff's beam is one of the more interesting abilities in the game.
With these elements, it's already clear why there are more people who play support in games like Rivals today.
Still, I think Jeff's beam would be more interesting if Rivals had 30% less healing on every ability in the game of just completely flat.
Than who played Medic back when. That's before.
And by the way, if you did that and you reduce the ability for the supports to be able to self-heal, you could also reduce the lethality of the dive DPS in retrospect to that.
Before we get into the great strides that have been made towards allowing supports to engage in combat. This was one of the sticking points I had with the supports initially, and I will say it's still not great, but it is leagues above where it was in TF2.
Sure.
What we essentially have for most of the Rivals supports is a building upon what the devs at Valve were going for with the crossbow and Ubersaw. Most of the supports can't engage in combat with impunity, but they have tools that encourage them to be on the lookout for opportunities to get some damage in, snag kills, and help push advantages.
Sure, yeah.
What separates Rivals from TF2 here is the greater frequency with which the support is given these opportunities and the increased impact they are allowed to have. With all the new tools the supports have been given, the issues with being targeted are felt a lot less. They have more
new tools, also known as free infinite peel cooldowns, right, on every single character.
Outs in the form of mobility, sustain, and defensive power, and this both gives them more free
the override abilities. They're not augment abilities.
reign to, exist on the battlefield, and it also allows them to use these tools to stage more aggressively, and make and survive plays that the medic could never dream of.
Yeah.
The increased impact they can have, meanwhile, is felt for two reasons. For one, the strength of the offensive tools given to the supports, and for two, the environment the supports find themselves in. The offensive tools the Rivals supports have, while still are more potent than the medic's slow, single-shot crossbow.
Of course,
Cloak and Dagger's auto-aim or Invisible Woman's piercing projectiles are great for confirming kills on wounded enemies, and can work almost passively. Luna Snow's primary can be devastating if you can sneak in a headshot on someone, and Rocket's primary
it's completely degenerate because Luna Snow's the baby character.
Shred a tank's health bar up close. All of these are potent on their own, but can be extremely valuable because of how much healing there is in Rivals. A big job of the supports in Rivals that I don't think enough people talk about is helping to confirm kills. Numbers in
getting breakpoints is very important in Rivals because the moment that somebody stops getting healing, for instance, like you take this clip just here, right? This guy walks outside of healing range.
Enough people talk.
He's fucking dead. The moment he gets to here, somebody has to confirm his kill before he gets back into healing range. Otherwise, he's infinite health again.
Healing numbers in Rivals are crazy high, so someone on low HP can be saved in an instant.
Yeah.
That little bit of extra damage that a support can provide goes a long way.
Yeah, you got to get that damage in before the supports realize they're not being healed and they die instantly. Man, I can't imagine the amount of Adderall I'd have to take to enjoy support in Rivals.
So basically, if you're playing a support, any support, and you end the game with 0 final hits, you're doing it wrong. As someone who enjoys playing support to support my team, this is great. It's great for making you feel more impactful while you're putting your focus on your team and not on chasing kills.
Yeah.
But if that isn't your thing, the supports in Rivals still have something for you. There are multiple supports who are more or less entirely...
I think the demand of supports is very high, right? With the healing needing to be so instant.
...built around engaging the enemy in direct combat, foregoing actively supporting their team in favor of the simple joy of shooting people. This bridges the gap between the support and DPS gameplay experiences, providing both the
I think Mantis is a cooldown and a buff juggler, and Ultron's pretty much the same. Like, I agree that there's a lot of joy in just shooting people, but there's a joy in that because the joy comes secondary sometimes to the actual healing part, which is being able to shoot people while still having active knowledge of the people around you and their needs, which is something that people don't really understand. There's a lot to do on a character that needs to look at an enemy while also knowing what's going on with their team.
That comes from supporting.
That's very interesting. It's not just shooting people is fun. Right, shooting people while needing to know everything going on around you.
The moment-to-moment excitement that comes from engaging the enemy in combat. But what about the potential balance issues we talked about? Were those just overblown? Not really. See, the more offensively oriented supports all have big trade-offs in their kits. Mantis, Adam Warlock, and...
Potential balance? Did he talk about potential balance problems?
Ultron all have comparatively much worse healing than other supports like Invis, Luna Snow, or Cloak and Dagger. They also feature more limited...
Yes, which they don't need to have, to be clear, because I don't think the hybrid tax needs to be anything more than 10%.
Utility options. Mantis and Ultron have much worse mobility than any other support, and even their offensive options aren't as good as some of the other supports because they get to use theirs all the time. The game also uses its ultimates to balance...
Adam Warlock has insane burst healing. It's crazy.
Offensive supports. With the exception of Mantis, the more aggressive supports don't have the same essential healing circle ultimates the main supports have, which is a hole in your team that you're absolutely going to feel.
That's so sad and depressing, man. To hear that phrase after so many months of Rivals being out is just ludicrous.
This is essential for these
these characters are worse because they don't have a big healing AoE that stops all things happening in the video game. All right.
Characters and keeps everything balanced and feeling good, at least in theory. While there are a bunch of problems with the supports in Rivals, we're primarily going to be focusing on two: triple support and the experience of the average player. We're going to start with that second one. While big strides have been made, at the average skill level, the supports are still heavily reliant on their teams. Capitalizing on your team's plays by getting damage in and confirming kills is an important part of playing support in this game.
Yeah.
But if your team is playing with their monitors turned off, then we're back to square one. At least at the average skill level, you can't really do anything but heal and hope you get the opportunity to make a contribution. It's still extremely difficult to carry on a support.
That's because there's a lot of responsibility in the support role to be continuously doing things like that.
Even the supports who can engage in combat freely and have a degree of carry potential are very limited at this skill level. Healing is extremely in demand in Rivals.
Is Mantis limited at this skill level? I feel like they can just do whatever they want and just have to keep their right clicks out.
And not being able to fulfill that demand in an average 2 support game where everyone just wants to face tank everything is going to lead to a bad experience.
Well, it's not really my problem if they want to face tank things. They'll slow down when they realize they're on Mantis, right? It's the other support's problem. Like, you're just taking on too much demand. Like, these characters are designed to be more aggressive. If you're not playing them more aggressive, it's really a you problem.
These supports are thus largely pigeonholed.
And I agree that Rivals has a lot of demand for instantaneous reactive healing. And that's really a gameplay loop problem.
Support team compositions.
Doesn't mean these characters are worse,
but seldom
just means other characters in the system around them are badly designed.
In the hands of the average team of 6 dingbats. So even these supports are heavily reliant on their teams to perform. However, when you do get a team that can make a 3 support comp work, we run into some issues that aren't entirely unexpected. The issue you'll likely face playing against a good 3 support comp is pretty simple. Nobody ever fucking dies. Remember that healing numbers in Rivals are extremely high, so with 3 supports all healing everybody...
It's so fucking... I'm sorry for peeking, Mike. It's so goddamn sad, man. I don't know how people still play triple support in Rivals.
Almost constantly, if you aren't on top of your game, it's going to be extremely hard to get anything done. With all the healing...
It's almost like if you make a character like Adam Warlock around instantaneous peel and high damage, and then put enough healing to be able to generally survive on top of the instantaneous heal, you get instant peel and continuous throughput, and no damage loss. Crazy, isn't it?
3 support comp has...
But that's just to do with them being too high in their numbers, honestly.
There's way more room to make mistakes. So basically, in a game with 2 teams of roughly average skill, the one running 2 supports has to play almost perfectly, while the 3 support team can play much more relaxed. In this exchange, the 3 support comp has a big advantage, and even in the scenarios where they don't...
Yeah, because they have upped the attention economy of Rivals to such a ludicrous degree. And I do think that's true for Overwatch as well. And I hope it gets to the comparison that the Overwatch, because of its high low healing system, has very little attention-based demand from the support category on what they have to do in terms of their team. They can kind of just do anything because they're mostly independent. And Rivals is kind of like up here with a maximum amount of attention demand because it's so sharp, and at the same time as being sharp, the healing's so high. So we have this kind of like balance where we're off on both ends, in my opinion.
It's still incredibly annoying. Team fights against a triple support comp at any skill level can drag on for way longer than it feels like they should. You'd intuitively think that a 3 support comp is going to have less damage output than a 2-2-2 composition, and you'd be right, but it's not hard to make up for.
I really hope he doesn't come to the conclusion that the problem is the supports are doing too much damage here.
Nobody on the 3 support team is dying, then they can afford to kill the enemy just a little bit more slowly. Besides, a big crux of any 3 support comp are the more aggression-oriented support characters, who can make up for the damage somewhat. And more crucially, with 2 other supports helping with the healing, individual support characters can have way more opportunities to make aggressive plays. Luna Snow can go from trying to sneak in a headshot every so often while healing to being a lethal marksman when she has 2 other supports helping to pick up her slack.
Yeah, 100%.
And when it really
Agreed.
comes down to it, in this game to find...
But that's because of the sharpness in the game, these characters have had to be given so many resources that allow themselves to be able to be self-sustaining, while other people aren't self-sustaining, that when they get given, when they get, like, set loose from the idea that they have to continuously pay attention to people around them, they can use those self-sustained resources to commit unfair duels onto other people in the game. And yeah, it's just crazy.
And by its support ultimates, the 3 support comp can have 3 invincibility ults while you can't. This isn't to say 3 support completely runs away with the game. With 3 supports all competing for healing stats, they're going to get their ultimates considerably slower than a 2 support comp, and this can absolutely lead to lost fights. Plus, skilled players can use the right characters and more advanced tactics to kill through 3 support healing, but there's the kicker. For skilled players, 3 support is much less...
It's not even skilled players, it's just higher ranks, honestly, because this is communication and stuff like that to be able to do it. Skilled player to be able to burst into backline? I suppose playing divers a bit more skilled.
An issue. For lower skilled players, it remains an awful slog. Even if you can deal with it, a 3 support comp absolutely mauls certain characters, and being disallowed from playing the character you want to play feels lame as hell. If you're an average gamer, just don't try playing Spider-Man into a competent 3 support team where the supports are all looking out for each other. It is so hard to get anything done.
But if you reduce Spider-Man's lethality, and you also reduce the support's ability to be able to heal themselves and general ability to be able to heal in the game, that interaction gets a lot more healthy, right?
And that speaks to a really grave
Everything's taken
issue
to a
with
fever
these team
pitch in
comps.
Rivals.
They almost make the DPS role kind of irrelevant. I don't know if that would actually happen in Rivals, considering how insane the designs of some DPS characters are, but do put a pin in that, because we'll be coming back to it in a moment.
Well, the DPS are a type of class of characters that create sharpness on the enemy team. Right, that's the idea. They create situations in which the enemy team is unlikely to be able to press their buttons in time or be able to kill through their buttons. That's the job of the DPS. Now, the tanks are the ones that create the space, the supports are the one that reduce those kind of scenarios. So, like, the DPS are never going to become obsolete just because the supports are creating an unfair duel onto somebody in the backline of the other team because they have 3 supports and they're able to do that with all their cooldowns and all their damage, and their damage is quite high. They still don't have the lethality necessary to be able to cut through the healing and the sustain on the other team necessarily and reliably enough. The idea is that if you, for instance, support a Luna Snow when they're doing something crazy like this, that is still necessarily worse than supporting a DPS character while they do something like this, because the DPS character, with the extra healing and the extra resources, multiplies the effectiveness of the sharpness of their abilities and their ability to kill through stuff than supporting another support would.
And while 3 supports build their crucial invincibility...
Luna, please stop with the bro. Just wait a minute. Oh man, bro. Oh, Dan, you're gonna just wait a minute. Oh man.
Ultimates more slowly. There is nothing more lame in this entire game than when a big ult fight breaks out and you lose because the enemy team got to make themselves invincible for longer than you did. 3 support comps can definitely feel like a problem. However, the issues we have with our supports in Rivals have all been felt before. It's worth remembering that Rivals was made almost 10 years after the hero shooter genre, as
the issues we have with the supports in Rivals have been felt before.
We understand it today was defined. And as bad as some things are, I do think lessons were learned. It's just perhaps that the application of those lessons wasn't perfect.
Okay. It's really interesting that he hasn't really concluded on the Rivals section in my mind. He said about the problems with Rivals. TF2, he hasn't really said about many problems with TF2. He said why TF2 Medic works, the problems with Rivals supports, but he hasn't really pointed out why Rivals supports don't work. He's just pointed out some problems with them. And now he's moving on to Overwatch, which is really weird. It's very hard to find solutions to these problems, to be frank. Just saying, I don't really know what the conclusion of this video is going to be, if not, I know some sort of solution, right? Is the trap almost all these hero shooting critiques? The trap is, I don't know, man, I guess there's some issues, right? In which case, I wonder why you're making content if you don't really have anything relevant to say. 1 second.
2 single target, largely passive abilities.
Okay, so literally, the curtains were blowing to such a ludicrous degree We'll go back. Curtains were blown to such a ludicrous degree that it's literally knocking stuff over in the opposite room because it's drawing so much air through the house. Okay.
That's going to bring me to Overwatch.
Hello, Overwatch.
It's telling in this game that two of the first support characters players got their hands on were Mercy and Zenyatta.
Okay.
Mercy is very much a medic offshoot, but with more going on in the form of her mobility, which is fun to use and requires mastery, and her having to cycle between targets with her healing and her damage boost.
Yes.
Zenyatta, meanwhile, is the progenitor of the aggressive support archetype, with two single...
No, Zenyatta's a character with more reliable... Yeah, he is the progenitor of the aggressive support archetype, but I prefer to focus on the idea that Harmony Orb is very reliable and can stick on target for multiple seconds past when they lose LOS to you. Yeah, he's the aggressive support archetype, no problem, sure.
Target largely passive abilities in his healing Harmony Orb and his damage vulnerability Discord Orb, allowing him to put all of his focus on shooting.
Yeah.
Immediately, the developers
Shooting, all the focus on shooting, sure, why not?
Of Overwatch appeared to be looking to improve upon the medic's shortcomings and expand upon what a support character could be, and
Agreed,
this attitude
that was the
persists
intention.
throughout their support releases. Pretty much every support has something in their kits to keep the player engaged, whether that be something unique to them that's fun to use and requires mastery, like with Mercy and Juno's mobility, the ability to contribute to combat more readily in the case of Baptiste and
Just check my cat's okay. Okay, I'm back.
Ana, or a kit focused entirely around engaging in combat in the case of Brigitte, Zenyatta, and Lucia.
Entirely around engaging in combat. Brigitte, okay.
And I didn't list 3 in that last category for no reason. Most of the supports in Overwatch today are designed to have unrestricted ability to engage the enemy in combat, and in fact...
Yes, I'd say so. I think the reason for that is long and storied.
Several of them need to engage in combat in order to heal and support their team.
Okay, sure, yeah. That's if you're going to start making supports, eventually you do end up doing a lot of the I need to do something in order to get my support archetype. That's just natural.
This is a very different approach than what we see in Rivals, and I won't mince words, it has a lot of predictable consequences.
Okay.
Getting the good out of the way first, if you like playing to support your team, there is a lot to like with the supports in Overwatch. Supporting feels way more active in this game than it does elsewhere.
Disagree in general. I mean, supporting through cooldowns is very active, but the actual support is very minimal in terms of the amount you can actually do with it.
Problem with the gameplay.
Supporting through space and supporting through damage as well, that's very active, but the actual supporting in terms of healing, that's relegated.
Feeling static and like you can't really do anything is almost completely gone.
Yeah.
Between each of the...
Because you are a character in and of yourself that can control space and do other things like that.
Supports, we see all the features we've already talked about, and there's always something to do and something for you to consider. There are still supports who can struggle with a bad team, like Mercy and Lifeweaver, but most of them
Lifeweaver is just badly designed, I'm going to be honest.
Have a degree of carry potential. Moira's mobility and self-healing can allow her to snag kills. Baptiste can get game-changing picks with good aim, and that's only the beginning of what they're capable of. Wu Yang can snipe people around corners. Brigitte can be a frontliner or 1v1 machine. There's some crazy stuff the supports can do.
Yes.
If you're the kind who likes engaging...
I mean, Brigitte is not a frontliner, but she can. Sure.
The game on the level of positioning, cooldown management, etc., you might feel a little bit left behind by Overwatch's more aggressive supports, but otherwise they're not bad at all. In the hands of someone with a little experience, they never struggle to feel impactful. But we should already know that a lot of problems have arisen from this design philosophy.
Have they?
The culmination of the problems we saw with the 3 support comp in Rivals were, in some ways, felt with Overwatch years ago.
Okay, you're gonna say years ago the free support was in Overwatch. I don't think that's true. I think, yeah, but the trouble with triple support is always that being able to stack 3 times the support's amount of resources is an issue, and they literally just had too many resources in a couple of the characters, and if they did nerf those characters in particular, especially Brig with the Inspire AoE healing, Lucio's AoE healing, and Moira's AoE healing, and BAP in a way. These kind of things could have been solved pretty easily. This isn't necessarily a aggressive support problem. This is a too high healing numbers problem and too many cross-pollinating resources problem. In fact, aggressive supporting is quite often the best thing to do as a second support. So, yeah, I really don't think this... I hope they're not going here.
Baptiste was loathed by some people back when he was released for basically being a better DPS character.
Yes. No, not when he was released. Actually, people didn't care that much about when he was released. When it got to Overwatch 2 and they made his shift to give him a massive heal on top of the passive heal, that's when people started hating him as a better DPS character. In Overwatch 1, people didn't really care as much. People just disliked the lamp because the lamp was an override to so many ultimates. And now we've got things like Dragon Strike that can go through walls and kill the lamp that wouldn't make it a problem nowadays.
His weapon was strong at range, pinpoint accurate, had loads of ammo, and was coupled with mobility, perfect for taking angles and high ground, and multiple great survivability tools.
Sure, yes. But Baptiste, importantly, doesn't have any burst damage that enables them to be sharp and lethal when they get into those angles. You see the difference between that and a DPS? Though Baptiste is a better duelist than a DPS, the job of DPS is not to be a duelist. The job of the DPS is to augment healing and create extra pressure by being given less resources, right? That's kind of like the job. Taking Bap to an angle and shooting people actually takes a lot of resources away from your team and puts a lot of pressure on your team but first off draining your health bar and your resources, and second off taking resources away from the rest of the team. Putting a soldier there with a harmony orb on them, or an Ashe there with a harmony orb on them, allows them pretty much infinite repeaking at perfect range with incredible amount of sharpness, with their own dynamite ability to be able to do stuff, and a more shots of Ashe, which is more likely to be lethal.
All while still being able to heal his team.
Sure. I mean, if you use all of your buttons on yourself, you can still heal your team with right click, but you can't go to a massive deep angle and heal your team at the same time. That's not really a thing. And I'm going to be honest, people really have never complained about Baptiste apart from in a 1v1 where I agree he is too strong, and they did overbuff Bap with his shift. And yeah, there's a couple of problems there, but like nothing systemic.
If you could aim, Baptiste...
I don't think Bap should out DPS Soldier. I think it's perfectly fine for Baptiste and Soldier's DPS to be exactly the same. Soldier has Helix. Baptiste does not have Helix. Soldier therefore takes healing in a completely different way, and Soldier has a lot more horizontal mobility, enabling them to get into deep angles. So they're able to be a lot more sharp because they can go deeper, and be a lot more sharp because they have a burst. Completely different characters. I'm fine with their primary doing the same amount of damage. Doesn't matter to me at all. And does it fire rate perk give him sharp pressure? Yeah, I mean, Overwatch has had a massive sharpness creep on quite a lot of these characters. I agree. I think that's negative in general, but by definition, Baptiste doesn't do that as base kit, unless he's going to mention perks upping the sharpness of the character. If he doesn't, okay. So I can either argue against the truthfulness of this video that he doesn't mean, or I can argue against the spirit of the video and what he actually says, which is that Baptiste too strong as DPS. Like, if he doesn't know about lethality as a concept, then I can't really argue against him, right?
Team. If you could aim, Baptiste was a monster, and in the right hands, he still is. This was a big example of a reoccurring controversy with Overwatch's supports. Spend enough time in the right circles and you'll hear the words DPS but good get thrown around a lot. And
yeah, I mean, during Overwatch 2, things got kind of like thrown out. There's a couple of too many overbuffed characters, sure. But in general, that's due to people misunderstanding what DPS do.
Then there's a decently direct parallel to Rivals' 3 support problems. The game's infamous GOATS meta.
Sure, I mean, yeah, of course that's the parallel.
This was an acronym for Go All Tanks and Supports. And it, plus Blizzard...
What? GOTAS? Oh, go all Gatas? What the fuck is a Gatas? No, GOATS is named after a team.
Its inability
that originally played the GOATS comp.
To manage it and other team comps like it is frequently cited as the reason why current year Overwatch has role queue.
Yeah, well, it's because they couldn't fix incredibly simplistic issues because they weren't making the game of Overwatch at that point. They're making Overwatch 2, which was meant to be a PvE title, and therefore they had no developers on Overwatch. And Bobby, well, essentially, I don't know if Overwatch back then had the skilled staff to be able to understand the issues and be able to fix them. They've done a couple of nerfs to, well, they've done a couple of buffs to DPS, which were meant to fix them, but only made the problem worse by making it harder for 2 tanks to play into the hyper buff DPS, but not making it not making the DPS any better against 3 tanks. So essentially, like, they misbalanced it, but it's not like it's a core issue with the format. God, it's raining. Bloody hell, it's raining out.
The tank role, in particular, was targeted with lots of blame here. Now, tanks were and are a source of a lot of Overwatch.
It was always a support problem. Well, it was a cross-pollinating resource between players problem. The resources in the game were just too high in general.
Watch's problems, including goats. I'm not trying to claim otherwise. But I don't think you can put the blame on an entire role being made basically redundant on just one of the game's other roles. This team comp worked by exploiting the strengths of 6 characters to basically form an unstoppable boulder that just rolled over the enemy team. You'd speed boost in, have...
It was actually very difficult to use. I'm interested in a description here, because the problem with goats wasn't actually due to goats being good, because goats wasn't actually good, because it was actually very difficult to play. The goats Google Doc, yes. What's Iostux? Where is he? So, oh no, that's a Yu-Gi-Oh thing. There's a goat format in Yu-Gi-Oh. Iostux. So if anyone thinks that Goats is easy to play, this is Iostux Goats Thesis in 2019. So I'm just going to start scrolling. Oh, there's the table of contents. Okay. So, yes, this is obviously for professional play. This is all the bubbles here, the different bubble usages, Matrix, Reinhardt ability usage, this is positioning, this is ults, this is Goats variation, and this is a 71-page doc, which is longer than quite a lot of people's theses, even though it's pretty big font. I've just noticed. Anyway, the idea is that Goats is a very difficult comp to play. Goats didn't say play it in ranked. The problem with Goats was specifically that it had a lot of prevalence in tournament scenes, and it lasted for a very long period of time, and Blizzard didn't do shit about it. It's not because support very DPS-y, therefore, etc. Let's see what his understanding of it is. Maybe I'm responding too early.
Everybody cover that just rolled over the enemy team. You'd speed boost in, have everybody constantly heal and use their damage negation tools, all while everybody pumped out a near constant stream of damage into the enemy.
No, that's not how it worked at all. That's really not how it worked at all. There was almost no damage in the Goats comp. All the damage in the Goats comp came from Reinhardt and Zarya. And then D.Va controlled the angles. The Lucio spammed. It was damage, I guess, but the Lucio didn't really do anything in terms of lethality apart when there was a crunch. Moira, maybe we talk about Moira. Zen, obviously Zen was a lot of damage, but that Zen wasn't played for the damage. Zen was played for the ability for Discord to be able to give some sharpness back to the composition, because when you do actually put in a lot of melee stuff, Discord has enough sharpness to be it's definitely a DPS like thing, the amount of sharpness available from Discord Orb. I do agree, but it's definitely utility and it's definitely a support character in and of themselves instead of a DPS when you talk about it. Moira got cut. Yeah, Moira got cut because she didn't cross-pollinate well enough. No, Moira got cut because Zen's strictly better on the mirror, because resources don't mean shit when your Reinhardt's dead. Yeah, I mean, Ghost was a comp where you had to play incredibly intelligently. And yeah, it was, sure, run onto point, stand on point, enemy team goes, meh. But when you start mirroring it, it becomes very deep, very fast.
Whereas 3 support in Rivals does feel that lack of damage from running fewer DPS characters, Goats really didn't. The team comp was lethal. Yes, in part due to the tank characters it used, but also due to the supports it used giving up a very little in exchange for their healing, utility, and mobility.
Absolute bollocks. Absolute bollocks. I mean, yeah, sure, for Brig was a release disaster, but that's not why. It's not the damage of the supports was too high. That's not true in any way. Yeah.
Supports it used giving up a very little in exchange characters it used, but
the other thing is the tanks in Goats. I think there's a difference between the tanks in Rivals versus Overwatch, quite obviously. The tanks in Rivals feel like shit and are shit for the very simple reason that when support is looking at you, you have infinite health in Rivals. If the support looking at you gives you infinite health in Rivals, very simple response from that, you can't give tanks abilities to go infinite in interesting ways. And Overwatch tanks can go infinite in interesting ways simply because the system is net negative. So if you can give them enough resources to go infinite, then a lot of things can kind of like go from that. You can use those resources in a really cool way.
Also due to the supports it used giving up a very little in exchange for their healing, utility, and mobility.
That's not true.
Each support could heal and do whatever else it was they did, all while dealing damage.
No, that's not why people pick Lucio. The dealing damage is kind of like neither here nor there for Lucio. Obviously, the ability to be able to boop is more important. If I got Goats and I remove Lucio's gun, I would rather remove his gun than I would remove his boop ability. Is that pretty self-explanatory enough for you? Yeah, I mean, yeah.
So basically, it was that nobody ever fucking dies problem combined with much greater damage and aggression.
It wasn't. It wasn't. The nobody fucking died problem was... So that's the interesting thing here. The problem with Goats wasn't actually... Sure, it was the AoE healing, but it was also the fact that DM and Bubble are these two resources that are able to funnel so much infinite sustain into players and Rhine Shield in general that they essentially can stabilize any end state solution. It's not a DP... it's not a support problem necessarily.
Leaving the enemy desperately trying...
And yeah, it is a support problem. Obviously, the Goats was enabled by support, but it's certainly not a support DPS problem, which seems to be the framing here.
...to hold as they get bowled over by a nigh immortal enemy team. You can find old clips of Goats Comp on YouTube just trampling over an enemy team without stopping and winning a game in less than like 2 minutes. It was genuinely kind of appalling.
So why isn't it on the screen right now? Okay, I'm going to look it up. I'm looking for the Goats team, see if there's anything of theirs. There must be stuff on the YouTubes for it. There must be a game somewhere of one of the original Goats games. They're playing Goats here, okay.
I'm just gonna contest.
Goats actually playing Goats. I think that's Moira in the corner. Yep, this is Goats. Let's go back to the start. So this is the original team that founded the Goats comp. Go back here.
It's not an angle, like, they can't see that.
But like, they can see me.
Yeah,
Right? Just don't peek too far forward.
yeah, I'm pretty sure you play
You're playing Orisa D.Va. Honestly, SQC's team so deserve to lose here. Okay, I see you Cyanide, but I found a better one, probably.
Looks like ground comp, to be honest. Lucio? Ground comp.
Ground comp. It's a ground comp. It's not Goats, it's a ground comp.
They're going hotel, they're going hotel. Stand.
So they use shield in order to be able to get through. Is that a support issue with them being able to put out too much damage? Obviously not.
Yeah, rotate.
Oh, they're on triple tank here. Orisa, Roadhog, D.Va. Man, these fucking coaches back here were cooked.
Welcome back.
I'm just gonna do
Ryan?
sorry, Mark.
They're just standing there menacingly. There's no angles. There's no shit. The reason why Ghost worked is because people are fucking stupid back here. They're not hot.
And he has across.
Was that a sustain problem, or was that a problem with all three tanks, including two tanks that were poke tanks, standing in the same spot like idiots? Look at this positioning, right? They go through hotel.
Ground comp.
There's D.Va. There's Roadhog. What are we doing, guys? We're just playing the comp wrong. You idiots. What are you doing? Roadhog, get your ass over there. Like, what are you doing? No, you shouldn't be over here.
They're going hotel. Stand.
Spam. This guy with his call outs. You know what? I genuinely forgot how bad teams were back here. You could have been a coach and just like won the league in like 5 minutes with some bronze players.
Okay, I'm here. Give him one for now.
Rear.
He's not even aiming for heads.
Fuck, I showed it.
Hold up.
Give us one.
Watch out.
I'm sorry here.
Nice.
Ryan, go for Jett. Watch out, he's going for Jett.
Right.
They were just standing just by him. Admittedly, Ghost is going to crush on this comp.
We're down right now. I'm dead.
I think we need a match.
Meanwhile, Goats press 1Q.
Okay.
This is a counter comp right here.
Even a Master's DPS can see what they're
Make
doing
it.
wrong now. They were so bad back here.
Trying to poke down the armor.
Admittedly, being bashed through shield was still complete bullshit. I do have to say that. It's crazy looking back to these days with Ghost Comp, how bad people were at the video game.
No one will die.
It's just so crazy.
Go charge.
Get the dragon.
Who's the best Winston during his prime? Well, he's currently on Orisa and Reinhardt. So.
Right
Maybe.
side forward.
Someone else.
I'm dead. Oh.
Sign, what do we fight?
This guy's saying that damage is the reason why people play Goats. It's nothing to do with it. He's saying that support damage was too high. It's crazy. You guys can see what Goats was doing. It was just stacking resources, simple as. Like, it's nothing to do with, I don't know.
You might say this was due to the individual characters involved in the Goats comp. That's a complaint you might hear in relation to
Yeah, of
Overwatch's
course.
implementation of role queue, that it was only done because Blizzard were unable or unwilling to simply balance the most problematic characters.
Yeah, they weren't making Overwatch. They were making Overwatch 2. They're making PvE. They didn't know what they were doing. They're buffing Reaper. How is Reaper going to deal with 3 tanks? He's gonna murder the single guy on one tank. This is some Phoenix. It's only got 6.2k views, but this is like an hour-long video essay. So I thought I'd given the kind of day, which is, by the way, more views than any of my slop gets on YouTube. But still, like, come on, man.
But I think there are certain core design issues that are more to blame. Let me ask you a simple question. What is the identity of each role? What are the characters in each role broadly all trying to do?
The only difference between them is that tank has a more involved role around controlling space. DPS and trading resources for space, that's a very important one. DPS as a role creates sharpness out of resources. So they take resources from their team, they create sharpness onto the enemy team, create situations in which lethal occasions can occur, and creates opportunities and other things like that. And supports have a kind of like malleable role. Obviously, they have to provide general healing for the tank, but they can also provide resources to the DPS or the support. They are the augmenter of these two things. They allow them to do different things, and at the same time use their bodies to do space and other things like that in certain scenarios, but it's not necessary for them.
The tank role is simple. They are there to create and control space.
Sure, but they are there to trade resources for space. That's the important one.
Winston can jump on problematic enemies to give his team some breathing room. Ryan can use his shield to help his team safely push.
At least he got to space. I respect anyone that gets to space as an answer. They clearly watched 10 minutes of Spylight.
Up, etc. But what about the other roles?
Yes.
DPS is the hardest to pin down because the
It's not. It's the generally least understood.
DPS role covers heroes from May to Soldier 76 to Widowmaker, who are all very...
Space has become such a slop meaningless word nowadays. Yeah, it's become a hard one because space is everything. Pressure as well. Pressure is less used, but pressure is a word that's not really... It's said a lot, but not really understood.
very different. But I think
like pressure is really the answer. Maybe that's why he's getting so confused, because he's using space instead of pressure. I use them so interchangeably sometimes. So pressure is the act of making the enemy team do something that they don't want to do, right? It's the act of forcing actions out the enemy team. So tanks create pressure by spending resources. DPS create sharp pressure in order to push and get kills and be able to cut through other stuff. And supports augment other characters' pressure and commit pressure themselves with some of the stuff they do. That's basically it. It's all pressure.
most people wouldn't disagree if I said the DPS characters are generally expected to put the pressure on and get kills.
Put the pressure on and get kills? Sure, like that's reasonable. Put the pressure on sounds like you don't know what you're talking about, though, because pressure is a thing, but... Yeah, it seems like you don't have the language to talk about this, right?
I mean, if you've ever been in a game where nobody on the enemy team is dying, who do people blame? Usually the DPS players,
yeah,
right?
But the supply of support for the DPS players, not allowing their abilities and their kits to be augmented in the way that allows them to create sharp pressure situations, or the tanks not like controlling space in a way that allows the DPS to create sharp pressure situations.
So let's say that's the DPS role's job. It's certainly why most people play the role, I think. The DPS characters are on the team to apply pressure and get kills.
Sharpness. That's what the DPS is there for. They're for sharpness. They do the other things. Tank is there for resources converted to pressure. DPS is there for resources converted to sharpness. Support is there to provide those resources in different ones. Can you up the video quality? This isn't me. This is... actually, it is me. I'm so sorry.
Now, when I say the supports can engage in combat and have
I don't think that last clip was me.
carry potential, this is pretty much what I mean. The supports can apply pressure and get kills like a DPS can, while also being able to support their teams.
They can't. Because in general, these supports are less lethal. The reason why Zen is less lethal is because Zen, on himself, obviously, when we talk about Discord, or we can talk about that being a DPS style ability, but by himself, if he takes an angle, he is very much at liberty to be instantly killed on that angle if he is challenged, right? He is very fragile, and therefore he can use he can only use his health bar once, right? If he goes into an angle, he's stuck there, and if he gets caught out, he's dead, instead of being in a duel that he can leave, right? The fact that Zen has no mobility makes it so he is less able to put out consistent pressure in a sharp way onto the enemy team. The only pressure he can put out is a lot of spam down main and Discord Orb as utility. CC kick? Yeah, well, we're not talking about this. He's talking about goats. I'm happy to talk about goats era. That means I don't have to think about Custer for a couple of hours.
Okay, so if that's what we want from the supports, then that begs the question. What else can the DPS characters do? I mean, they're gonna need...
We don't want sharpness from the supports. The supports can be sharp and lethal, but we don't necessarily want just that, right? And also, if we look into 222, we do something like this, yeah, sure, the supports are less good when stuff is pro. As long as the DPS are better with support provided to them than the supports are, then there'll always be a place for DPS as long as we keep resources in check.
Something if the supports are going to be able to do both things. Well, the thing is, it depends on the character. However, the supports all have one thing in common. They can all heal. Remember what I said about healing?
Which, by the way, I don't think should be exclusive. I'd be entirely up for a tank that had a healing resource. I think that'd be fine and interesting in many ways.
It's really strong. And that never...
It's not just really strong. No, healing isn't strong, right? It's not just strong. It's strong with context.
Stopped being true. How valuable what an individual DPS character can provide to their team in addition to the pressure they can apply and the kills they can get fluctuates depending on the game's meta. But healing is always good.
No, it's not. Healing is not always good. There's plenty of situations where you'll drop healing for other things. For instance, Goats drop Moira for Zen. Do you think maybe there's a reason for that? Is to do with lethality and that Zen can provide. But like, it's not a damage thing. It's not just the supports were damaging. It's that there was a specific adaptation to the Goats comp provided by Zen that allowed it to mirror slightly better, right?
You always need to be doing things to win.
30% passive making it better to DPS in many situations. We can talk about today. And yeah, today I think it's a lot less defined as to what particularly a support does provide versus a DPS. But it's pretty obvious still that supports are less sharp than DPS, regardless of the fact that they're not able to just sit there and provide healing resources and be able to contribute enough. I think there's some nuance here, but I will say one of my gripes with supports being able to output that much offensive pressure is, and this is hero dependent, how easy it is to output said damage, how easy it is for your button to be pressed or to hit people, how big it is, how fast it is. Of course, it matters that DPSing means you're not doing other things, but it's an important conversation. Agreed.
And healing lets you do more things. So the rub is, if the supports can engage in combat just like a DPS can, and be providing healing to their teams at the same time, then why would you play a DPS?
Zen can't. Sorry, Brig can't. Like, that's the thing. Brig can't. Brig doesn't engage in combat in a general sense. Brig whip shots, looks for Inspire, and then AFKs. Brig is a poke character for the most part. Yeah, sure, she brawls when she's already winning, but that's just a win more scenario. Doesn't really help you in many ways.
Obviously, the DPS shouldn't be the only role allowed to do damage and get kills. I'm not saying the support role should be just relegated to heal botting. But what distinguishes these two roles? Well, you might think that the supports are held back by their obligation to heal and support their teams.
They are.
However, there are several things that make this not hold up. As you get better at the game, you become obligated to use your character's kit to its fullest potential. If your kit is designed in a way that makes it really good at engaging in combat, then you are obligated to take advantage of that.
Yes, and supports are a lot more damage focused than they were previously. They're as good as dueling, but they're not as good as and yeah, I don't really understand how we got here from Goats though, right? Because Goats wasn't anything to do with this. Brig is poke, doesn't she get destroyed by poke? Brig gets destroyed by poke. Yes, Brig is anti-dive poke. You can be anti-dive and poke at the same time.
If you're playing Baptiste and you can get a major advantage by just ignoring your team and gunning people down, then that's what you're gonna do, obligation or no. Besides, there are several supports whose ability to support their team is greatly de-emphasized, ranging from Moira, who needs to damage enemies in order to heal,
Do you think Moira's ability to, like, sure, right now, all the ability, do we just draw a line under Goats at this point? I think it's probably reasonable to say that he's talking about modern day Overwatch, which in particular, yes, I agree. The general ability to be able to support without cooldowns has been de-emphasized. I think that's a problem in the game, and I think it should be challenged. But Moira of all characters, right? Is the problem with Moira the fact that they're DPSing?
Healing lower on the priority list, all the way to Wu Yang, for which it is arguably throwing to try and hang back and support your team, because so much of the value from his kit comes from sniping enemies with his water bubble.
No, I agree with this. The character is a passive supporter with an active DPS skin on them, and lots of Overwatch characters do this. I'm yet to see you tell me why it's a bad idea, aside from hand-waving vaguely at the Goats comp existing in 2019, 7 years ago.
And furthermore, not only are people going to become less reliant on their support's healing as they get better at the game,
Yes.
there are also a lot of characters designed around functioning independently of their supports. It's more
The
than
whole point of Brig is drawing out engagements 100%.
possible to run a team comp where the supports barely have to do anything to back their teammates up.
Yes,
and
that's-
even
that's
if you
on
aren't
purpose.
running such a team comp, there are multiple supports who can support their teams passively.
Okay,
These
what's the
supports
point?
don't have to put any attention on helping their team, instead just doing whatever in their
No, it's not true. They still have to put attention on their team. Brig has to put a lot of attention on her team. Loads of other characters have to. Like, the supports have to play an active role in space control, and playing an active role in space control is paying attention to your team and the enemy team and positioning of each characters and what you can get the best from your players by using your resources to be able to control space. Doesn't mean that you are, hey, I'm just DPSing. Haha. It's DPS time.
vague vicinity. So if the support
Sure, Ilari put down Lamp, but there's a lot of gameplay there too, and I don't think there's anyone would say Ilari is a better DPS than Ashe, because they just do different
held
things.
back by their obligations, then I ask again, what distinguishes the support role from the DPS role? Besides their ability to heal, there really isn't anything.
The DPS role.
Utility options aren't exclusive to the support role, and many supports can play extremely similarly to a DPS character. So if the supports are just DPS who can heal, then why would I ever pick a DPS character?
I'm sorry, it just is.
Unless a DPS character has a specific tool that makes them shine in the current meta, or just use them,
Hey, this character's not relevant anymore. Maybe they were at the time.
you likely wouldn't. And I think that, beyond the individual strengths of the characters involved, is what led to the infamous GOATS comp.
Oh, fuck off. No, it isn't. Piss off. Come on, dude. Really?
There was just
You can't swap between modern day Overwatch with a 30% healing reduction, reducing the amount that supports can do, and also with a much more high relevance of cooldown focused stuff and dueling focused stuff, and be like, this is what caused the problem in 2019 when we had 8 supports. Sorry, there were like 10 supports. Anyway, but like still, like, come on.
no reason to play any of the DPS
Do you notice how he plays both DPS and support in the clips, but never 5v5 tank?
characters because the supports could do everything they could and more. So
Nope.
whereas the supports in Rivals are kind of static and can struggle to feel impactful, the supports in Overwatch have the exact opposite problem. They are way too good at engaging in combat, to the point where the roles
I agree entirely, and I think there is a too much emphasis put on engaging in combat in terms of being forced to be non-reactive to your teammates' health bar, but I do not think this is even nearly as much of a problem as you think, even though I am on your side. I still think, yeah, 5v5 dual stop 100%. I've argued against this to the ends of the earth, that supports should be less incentivized to be able to duel. But I don't want them less able to be able to duel, if you get what I mean. Right, sure, in certain scenarios, BAP shift needs that 100 health taken off it. A couple of other things, right? I want there to be Winston that needs the Anna to be able to jump in, so Anna is less able to duel because of that. But I don't want these things to Zen kick. I agree with that. Kiri's one that I think the healing is a better thing to be taken away from it. But the dueling focus isn't the problem in and of itself. It's taking back some aspects of the 5v5 dual slop while making it so that they are not forced to do this, right? I want the option there of dueling. I don't want to be forced into it as the only option to generate pressure.
identity has been completely diluted. And that leads us to this, my biggest issue with the supports in Overwatch. There's a pretty simple question hanging over the role as it stands right now. If there's nothing that distinguishes how the support characters play from the DPS characters besides the fact that they can heal, then what's the point?
Yeah, but also on top of that, why does it matter? I guess that's the other question you're going to have to answer here. What's the point? Okay, DPS are basically big supports are basically big DPS with healing. Okay, so yeah, it's not true, but so what if it is true? What's the answer there?
What is the point of there being a distinction between these two roles? If the supports can engage
You're wrong, but also, so what?
engage in combat with little to no restrictions, have strong mobility tools, good damage, and offensively
The
oriented.
so what so far has literally just been, well, goats exist, and I'm like, you haven't actually. There's a lot of arguments that are implied. Don't get me wrong. The identity of DPS I don't consider to be an argument in and of itself. It's kind of like an argument to the side of supports when we're talking about this. Like we're saying DPS have less stuff to do. Okay, well I don't think that's true, but that's an argument about DPS. So what? Right, what's the issue? The supports fill the role of DPS? Okay, well, I think the DPS still have a role, but at the same time, so what if that's true? We're in a role lock scenario, and the supports are unique.
Ultimates, then what
Supports have more expensive cooldowns or responsibilities to balance outside of dueling. A DPS has cheaper cooldowns and primary focus on dueling. It's pretty simple, even if the two were just as even as dueling. And by the way, I don't entirely disagree with you that supports are too dual focused at the moment. ... So what? We're in a 5v5 format. There's only so much stuff you can do in the video game. At a certain point, the supports are going to have to start picking up a gun.
distinguishes them from the DPS role?
There's lightning outside, and Peggy's not very happy about it.
It's not like supportive tools are exclusive to the support role. Soldier 76 can deploy an AoE heal, so
Not really.
Symmetra's teleport can help the team get
Utility, yeah, there's some utility in other roles.
into position and make plays. Sombra can hack health packs to ensure her team can get them, and hack enemies
I thought your question was, what's the point in playing DPS?
to shut them down when they try to make plays. So I ask again, what is the distinction between these two roles?
The distinction been washed out a little bit over time, but there's still a clear distinction here.
The reality is, there really isn't one. Change a few things about Moira's kit and she could easily be a DPS.
Agreed.
Change
Yeah.
basically nothing about Alari's kit and she could be a DPS.
Okay, sure.
There is nothing that distinguishes these characters from a DPS except for that they can heal.
Okay.
And on the other
So-
side of that coin,
You put a lot of stock into making your argument very clear that there's nothing distinguishing them, but yeah, the question is...
take Sombra or Soldier 76 and change some
Are we going to mention Cat as DPS, or are we just saying things? I think Cat would be more healthy as a DPS, yeah. I think they dropped Cat's healing and made him into a DPS, he'd be more healthy. It doesn't mean that everything's perfect. It doesn't mean there's not poor design. But the problem isn't that supports are do DPS-y. Sometimes it's that... sometimes it's the opposite.
things around in their kits and they could easily be supports. That's how thin the lines are between these two roles.
Yeah.
And I ask again, if there's nothing that distinguishes these two roles, then what's the point?
It's context in the video game. Without supportive roles, the game has no context, and we want to give the support roles agency. So we give the support roles enough damage to be able to give them agency. The what's the point argument needs to have some more words in it for me to be able to respond.
Just have tank and not tank. You could use the perk system to let the player spec into playing more supportive.
Yeah, but DPS are allowed more stuff in their kits that allows them more sharpness if you don't give them extra healing stuff. The healing stuff takes up a ridiculous amount of power budget in quite a lot of these kits. You're just misunderstanding, in my
on certain
opinion.
characters or something. This has further problems for the support experience. Like I said, if you're the kind of person who plays support to engage with the game in ways outside of direct combat, then your choices, at least the choices you can make without basically throwing, are much more limited.
Agreed. By the way, I completely agree with that. I think they're very limited at the moment.
You can't play Wu Yang, Brigitte, Moira, or Alari to
A game with 2 tanks and 4 supports and 6v6 just doesn't work. You'll get rolled by normal comps with 2 DPS 90% of the time. Agreed entirely.
engage separately with positioning or cooldown management. It's all combat all the time, which
No, I agree entirely. All combat all the time is a real big problem in Overwatch, and it's a problem because Season 9, 5v5, all of that type of stuff. This is a 5v5 complaint. I agree entirely. The Season 9 health pools, the Season 9 armor changes, the cauterize effect, all of this was a result of the things that were necessary after Season 9 changed the after 5v5 changed the game, and tanks couldn't control space in the same way that they did before. That's problems. I want to fix these problems, but yeah, he's reaching the right answer by using the wrong method. Maybe it's just that he doesn't understand enough about the history of the game. It's a classic. There's problems with supports, guys. Well, he just complains about the direct consequences of the format of the game.
might be whatever, but we've really lost sight of what was being done with the medic all those years ago. There's little in the way of unique gameplay experience that provides its
But if we make 20 supports, one of them's going to be the medic and the rest aren't going to be the medic, right? Like, we're not going to have like 5 medics. If you want to tell me like Mercy right now has less ability to be able to do that. I'm happy to engage in that argument. I agree, by the way, that Mercy has less ability to be able to play passively than she did before, and less agency when she does play passively than she did before. But you're not making that argument. You're just saying these heroes, and I'm like, well, you started making stuff at Mercy, and you're gonna have to to diversify at a certain point.
Its own form of gratification. The supports in this game are much more flat. With all that laid out, I think there might have been a
Sure, like, I don't disagree with that.
reason as to why the supports in Rivals are kinda static and samey. The Rivals devs were absolutely taking note of other games in the genre. Black Widow and Hawkeye would have never been designed the way they were if not for characters like Widowmaker and Hanzo.
What, badly?
And I think the design of the supports, even the newer ones, was similarly influenced by the supports in other games.
I think the design of the supports was mainly influenced by the idea that they want to sell the most skins as possible, quite frankly. They wanted to make the ground floor base layer of interaction with the game as easy as possible by giving everyone the most non-interactive gameplay loop that they could, and that resulted in a lot of problems down the line. Now Overwatch definitely went the other way, where you have to be a lot more interactive with the game, and I think that's a bad part of Overwatch. But again, that's not a problem with support doing damage. And by the way, your problems with Rivals is also about some, I don't know, like, it just seems like your problem with support's doing damage for some reason, instead of the problem being, well, either the format or the healing system, and those are the real issues.
Like or hate the supports in Rivals, they are at least meaningfully distinct from the DPS role. So if that explains the issues with the support.
But you were saying they do lots of damage earlier. Yeah, is Overwatch supports that much more DPS than Rival supports? Rival supports have a lot less agency to be able to DPS because they got so much more responsibility to be instantly at the place that they need to at the right time in order to stop somebody instantly dying, because Rivals is ludicrously sharp as a game, but they're basically the same, just that there's a lot lower healing.
Supports in Rivals, then how the hell did Overwatch get to where it is? Well, Overwatch is a 10-year-old game, so there are no doubt dozens of things that have informed how the game was designed over the years, but
Yeah.
let me lay out something I've been thinking about. Now more than
It's
ever,
mainly 5v5, and the changes from 5v5.
Overwatch has a ton of
And it's mainly trying to give people more agency. I mean, supported players want more agency at the same time as being able to play the juggle game. Not every single person can just be a health bar juggler, and that just be it.
characters designed to function largely independently of their supports. This has always been a thing, and even a necessity. Two of the first supports in Overwatch were Mercy and Zenyatta, only one of which is equipped to handle the healing needs of a team, but even so, that's not really her job. Playing around health packs and staging and knowing when to push was always a core part of the game, and it's only become more so the case. Nowadays, multiple characters are even more strongly encouraged to play around health packs, having unique bonuses that grant them more healing for picking them up. In addition, health regen.
Yes, I agree. Overwatch is a lot more solo oriented, and that's a result of 6v6. I don't see that as a support problem, because the supports in Overwatch are and yeah, sure, you're identifying the right problem, but the supports in Overwatch are exactly what they need to be in the current format. So if you don't like the format, say you don't like the format, surely. I think the thing that makes them feel that way for this person is the fact that Rivals is a much more attention-oriented game. Agreed entirely. Yeah, no, entirely agreed. And they're misidentifying that as a support doing damage. It's very weird. Yeah, I have drunk too much juice. I think this guy just has huge gaps in his knowledge of the game and how it's changed due to factors other than supports having damage in the first place. Yeah, it seems like he's identifying a downstream effect of a change rather than identifying the upstream cause and saying that that might be the issue. I think a little bit of that applies to Baptiste, obviously.
Is much more common, and everyone has access to free out-of-combat health regen. So with a little map knowledge and use of
people are a
cover,
lot more
anyone can heal off any
Agreed.
damage they take. Plus, like I said, supportive utility isn't...
And it's interesting because this guy clearly is capable of identifying problems, right? That's the three levels, right? You have the idiots that feel the problem, you have the smart people that can identify the problem, and you have the geniuses that know the cause of the problem, right? And it's very hard to get to level 3 there. And obviously it's me. I'm the genius. And Tiefling gets to sit on the fence too with me. You can join me, okay?
So if you're playing a character designed to support your team, and your team can function largely independently of you, then what are you meant to be doing with your time? Besides engaging the enemy in combat, there really isn't anything else for the player to do, so that's what the dev
Yeah, so play a character that does healing. I mean, even in the worst case scenario right now, just go play Mercy and heal that diva. Yes, I know it doesn't give you as much pressure as it did before, which is a word you don't know what it means. But I know it doesn't give you as much pressure onto the enemy team as it did before, and that feels like less agency, and it is less agency, and that sucks. But there are still characters in the game where you can play relatively passive. There just are. The developers for Blizzard might have had some kind of inclination towards the amount of people playing the tank role at the time that they put in the role queue into the video game. It's like, okay, all right, mate. Yeah, okay, yeah, probably. Yeah, probably the team comp was part of it. Ghost was obviously part of it, but this seems like a separate comment than anything else you said.
couldn't figure out how to balance tanks. It feels more like someone decided this was the only way they could get people to actually play all the roles. How exactly we got here, I can't say. I'll admit I might be talking out of my ass. Like I said, this is a 10-year-old game, and I wasn't even an adult for most of its lifespan. But I think it's safe to say things aren't changing significantly anytime soon.
Well, the problem with support, I guess he's trying to imply that there was not enough supports around. It's very hard for me to get my head around because I'm so used to people talking about this in the context of tank, because that's obviously the correct way of it. But quite obviously, I guess he's saying that maybe people weren't willing to play the more passive supports. They gave them more active stuff in order to get people into that role, or maybe he's just making a non-included or non-inclusive to his argument comment there that's not relevant in some way. But yeah, sure, they definitely changed the to rogue queue in order to implement more even games in terms of 2-2-2. I enjoy that he did his research to find out about goats, but not to find out about the history behind rogue queue. I think it's easy to be harsh on people because he did his research about goats. Yeah, it's easy to be harsh on people. Again, this guy's processing lore on video games that happened when he was 8 years old. So really, there's only so much expectations, right? Why is my fan always in such an awkward place?
On that note, you'd normally end a video like this by talking about the changes you'd make and that you'd like to see.
Yes, because you haven't really given me the reason why you're unhappy, apart from the fact that supports seem to have less definition in Overwatch than they had before, which is an entirely fine observation, but it's not a analysis, it's just an observation.
We'll do that some, but this video isn't so much meant for that. In fact, I wanted to do some of the opposite, outlining suggestions I've seen and then arguing why I don't think they would work or that they aren't so simple. It'd be easy to say, for example, that we have both extremes, the boring heal bots and the basically DPS characters, and that all we'd have to do is find the middle ground.
No, I agree entirely. And you're right, we do have to find the middle ground. Yeah, entirely correct. And the middle ground is a 6v6 game with an active healing system that isn't overriding, and the cooldowns don't override as well, right? Overwatch is a very cooldown focused game with very low healing. Rivals is a very cooldown focused game with infinite healing. Let's just make it less cooldown reliant, bring up the reliance of people on general healing solutions rather than anything else, and go back to 2-2-2, which is the stable format that can handle it, which we had before. To be fair, I guess the only thing is he only brought up goats to wave the dead doll around, right? It's a classic one. Hey, I've got the voodoo doll. You're not allowed to talk about this. No, but I want to talk about 2019 Overwatch and how healthy it was in terms of the healing systems and the different types of things that were in the game and how much agency you had in terms of your healing. Oh, but they were so DPS-y. It meant no. Let's talk about 2-2-2 in 2019. Let's ignore double shield and put another couple tanks in the game. Let's play Overwatch Classic right now. Put another couple of tanks in the game and just see where we're at, right? Let's just put a couple mother tanks and supports in the game from Overwatch Classic, port them straight over, that balancing, and see where we're at. Because it seems to work perfectly fine. Because we made an entire mode of making it work perfectly fine. So what's the issue?
But what does that really look like? Taking Rivals
looks like Overwatch 2019 with more heroes.
As an example, I definitely think Rocket is a boring heal bot, but
maybe he doesn't know how many things have changed since Overwatch 5v5 was released. Maybe he's looking in retrospect about 6v6 in 2019 and thinking that the cauterized passive and the higher health pools and the higher armor pools weren't in the game. Maybe this is the misapprehension the entire video is based on. Maybe that's the issue. Maybe he doesn't even know. Like, at this point, I kind of had to question, because he's been wrong about goats and wrong about, well, not necessarily wrong, but inquiring about weird things to do with open queue versus roll queue. And maybe the answer is he doesn't know that it was fine.
But what about Cloak and Dagger? They have a lot more going on, but most people will still label them as another heal bot. Then, on the other side of that coin, after his mobility buffs, Adam Warlock is pretty much just a DPS character who can heal. He's definitely not the middle ground, but I don't think anybody would complain about his kit.
Yeah, agreed, Typhoon. Agreed, Typhoon. He just doesn't have the knowledge.
A big thing you have to remember when performing this kind of analysis is that, at the end of the day, the most important thing is whether or not the game is fun. Do you think the supports in Overwatch being DPS light or the supports in Rivals struggling to engage in combat and causing issues when they do makes the games less fun?
No, and I think Overwatch characters in terms of the support category could have less, more agency for basically no gain.
My opinion, yes, I think they do. However, I do think that characters like Alari are fun in a vacuum. Same with Cloak and Dagger. It's just that the design ethos behind it...
It's not being able to do both. That's the thing. It's having a lack of control about the types of things that you're able to do, and a very thin amount of stuff that is allowed or permitted in the game.
Each of those characters is present in nearly every other support.
Two extremes in Overwatch with a middle ground and give you a choice in 6v6. Pretty obvious.
Character in their respective games. So what I'm saying is, how would you fix an overarching problem caused by multiple individual characters? No one support in Overwatch causes the identity of the role to become diluted into DPS light.
And the by the way, there's the identity of the role diluted into DPS light. But there's Juno just down there, and there's Mercy over there that aren't DPS light. Of course, they're making Juno more DPS light because, haha, Spilo Custer, etc. But still, like, there is this supportive role in the game. The problem that is causing all this in Overwatch isn't the hero design or the classes or anything like that. In the same way that the problem in Rivals wasn't the heroes or the classes or anything like that. It was the systems that all of this is built on. In Rivals, it's infinite healing, it's ultimates being incredibly impactful, and infinite peel on the supports, and therefore the DPS being incredibly sharp into the backline. And in Overwatch, it's 40% anti-healing passive. It's the tank's health pool being bigger, everyone's health pool being bigger, and the sharpness purposely being decreased in the game, causing this. Like, it's a purposeful change, and unless you call out the systems, you're not really identifying anything. You're just saying, is it better to be a DPS or a support? A pure support, when the pure supports are there, they just feel like shit because of the systems choices they've made. And in Rivals, the pure supports are there. They are there. They just feel like shit because of the systems choices they've made, right? It's not anything to do with the characters.
But the DPS light thing is still a problem. The Overwatch devs have essentially worked themselves into a corner, and they can't really work their way out of it without pissing a lot of people off. To their credit, the devs seem to be aware of Overwatch's issues regarding its supports, and one of their newest characters, Mizuki, seems to address a lot of them. He's absolutely a support. He can engage in combat and snag kills, but multiple aspects of his kit limit his ability to do so.
I thought this would be exactly what he complained about.
Instead of constantly engaging, he plays around his team, poking and looking for opportunities to quickly dash in and push an advantage. It's a really fun support kit and a good step in the right direction. But then again, the same update that introduced him also added Jetpack Cat, who was another character you basically just play as a DPS, so...
Don't worry, mate, I ain't defending this ship.
Oh, Marvel Rivals is a much younger game, so it hasn't quite worked itself into the same corner, but anything that I would suggest would entail huge overhauls to the game that might cause their own problems. If you reworked all the immortality ults, then the offensive supports are being put on a more level playing field, which could lead to the game's 3 support issues being made even worse.
Come on, dude, you're so close to being there. Well, what you just said, but the opposite. You got to nerf the peel cooldowns, and you got to nerf the DPS's lethality, and you got to nerf the general healing. You're almost there. Like, if we do one thing, you got to hit it all. You got to hit the AoE ultimates. You got to hit the DPS ultimates. Nerf everything by 30%. Yeah, genuinely, it's the interactions between the characters that makes the game, not anything individual. When you create sharp interactions between characters, the game becomes sharp, and you end up with bad fallout.
And that's before we get into the potentially disastrous consequences.
And you're forgetting to give the tanks the ability to do pressure at all. Well, yeah, that's the thing. But the other thing is, you don't really need to do that much to Rivals tanks. You need to give them more AoE focus on their abilities. But in my opinion, Strange is already doing that, and quite a lot of the tanks are already doing that in Rivals. The trouble is there's no resource game to play around because the healing is so high and the DPS is so high, so you're not actually managing resources. You're not trading resources for space. That's the whole point. You're not trading resources for pressure. That's the whole point, right? So we just fix the resources, then you're more or less okay.
Consequences regarding the game's offensive ults. The most pressing issue for a lot of people who play Rivals is how do you solve 3 support comps, and the thing with that is that I just don't know. I mean, I know a lot of people hate 3 support, but I honestly have never had a problem with it. At least at the levels of play I chill at, it's never been much of a problem, and in my experience, the 3 support comp definitely feels its slower ult charge and lower damage. Of course, that leaves the glaring issues with higher levels of play, where in Overwatch and in Rivals supports are much more of a problem. When surrounded by people who know how cover works, and when played by people who can actually aim, characters like Baptiste and Luna Snow go from the more mundane characters they are in the hands of the average gamer to lethal threats. However, things like Baptiste and Luna Snow and Goat's meta were almost certainly not felt nearly as strongly for people who played the game casually.
Or at all, in terms of Goat's meta. I think when I was playing, I was like in GM, and I saw probably like 1 in 10 games where people successfully went Goats.
Than it was for the Sweats, who are a minority.
Don't get me wrong, it was like 1 in 3 games where people gave it a go, but you know.
Should you care about those levels of...
And Goats was always a cheese, so it's one of those where it's a gambit towards winning the game after something's gone wrong.
Play and how much are fair questions to ask. If it sounds like I'm rambling, yeah, I kinda am, sorry, but what I'm getting at is that nothing in a game like this is simple. And I took that for granted when I made my first video on the design of Marvel Rivals' supports a year ago. However, I don't want to make it sound like the developers shouldn't try. The biggest sin that I think a developer can make, and that these developers have made, is to shy away from experimenting and shaking things up. There are plenty of valid
What do you mean?
Concerns, but a misstep isn't something you can't correct later provided you actually, you know, care. So let me try and lay out the problem. The hero shooter genre is all about offering new and varying experiences, and that's exactly what the support role provides. Sure. The support characters exist because they're an opportunity to provide a unique gameplay experience. However, while that experience is gratifying in its own way, it leads to the supports struggling to feel impactful on the moment-to-moment level.
Can do, unless they have some sort of skill base. I don't feel like Mercy feels unimpactful unless their healing is tuned wrong. But I feel like this person just banging their head against the wall of the supports in Overwatch being badly tuned for the most part. To be clear, TF2's Medigun feels very slow compared to Mercy's old 200 health pool healing. It feels quite slow.
This is a problem in and of itself, and all of our other problems stem from trying to find solutions to it. You might take that as an excuse to throw the entire role away, but I would never go that far, because we know the idea can work. The engineer in TF2 is a supportive character, he provides a unique gameplay experience, and he's great. I know some people turn their noses up at the new Jeff, but I really like him, and I think he's a perfect character for new players. Cloak and Dagger is a fun character in a vacuum, it's just that every other support in Rivals follows a similar design ethos. So with that, I want to paint with a broad brush, and go over some ideas. Circling back to Luna and Baptiste, I think a problem a lot of developers run into is assuming the support kits they design will only ever be in the hands of a support player. That is to say, someone who plays to support their team, isn't too aggressive, and let's be honest, has on average lower mechanical skill.
Okay.
In the hands of such a player, Luna Snow's kind of absurd damage output isn't that big a deal because they're not actually going to be shooting the enemies all that often. But this ignores the potential issue of someone with far greater mechanical skill jumping on the character and using their absurd stats to their full.
The problem with Luna Snow and triple support is the fact that Luna Snow is an incredibly good ultimate and a basic insta-kill ability on cooldown. It's kind of not anything to do with her raw numbers, is it?
Potential. This isn't a catch-all observation, like I genuinely don't know what the thought process was with Wu Yang and Alari, but something like be more mindful of how a character functions in the hands of different kinds of...
You don't know what the thought process was with Wu Yang and Alari? It was to create a character that is able to provide the supporting role while being able to actively perform the dueling role and provide pressure and interact with different characters on their team in a different way. The idea of Wu Yang is actually very, very it's a straight flow with Wu Yang. The idea is that the right click is very good on a tracer, and the left click is very good at following up a tracer, and then we give them a couple of other abilities to fill it in. Right? That's kind of like the idea. You can say.
Of course,
I think this whole video is just a Rivals player doesn't know the issue with Rivals moment. They go to Overwatch and they look at Overwatch and they're like, oh shit, I don't know the issue with Overwatch either.
developers make balance changes for all sorts of reasons beyond the actual balance of the game. They might be encouraging the player base to pick up a
This guy's
character they
accuracy
feel
is
has been
incredibly low.
unjustly ignored. And yes, skin releases also play a role, but still. A lot of our issues stem in part from a simple fact. All of our supports have healing as a key part of their kits. Healing is really strong, but doesn't feel all that impactful on the moment-to-moment level.
No, it does feel impactful. It's just to different degrees.
So developers stack other things onto supports kits to...
Sure, they stack other things on the supports kits, but like
MOBAs are...
Sure, what if supports didn't all heal? But you're complaining about the lack of distinction between the roles earlier. I mean, it's absolutely fine for all supports to heal. I think that other roles could heal more. There could be more generalization between the roles in terms of allowing other characters access, especially off tanks could be allowed access to healing resources. I think that'd be fine.
Are another inspiration for the hero shooter genre, and outside perspectives are valuable. That said, at least for the hero shooters we have...
In a way, the roles are really there in open queue in order for people to generally understand what they should lock and play around. You can't have a support with no healing for the reason that fucking idiots won't understand that there's a support with no healing. That's pretty much it. There's nothing else to really process there.
Today, I just don't think that would work. Take Rem from Deadlock. He can buff up allied minions.
Oh no, we're talking about Rem in a hero-based shooter video. Oh dear.
Deny resources from the enemy.
It's a MOBA. It's a MOBA. You can't compare it in any way, shape, or form.
Have special access to bonus resources.
Yes, you could have a support, buffing support. That's kind of what Mantis is already in a way.
Resources almost nobody else gets via the game's underground tunnels, and he can use active items.
And yes, the most interesting type of support to me is supporting through augmenting what other people and other characters and other things on the map can do. That's the most interesting type of supporting to me.
He buys on his allies. None of these things have anything to do with healing directly, but Rem is undoubtedly a support character. However, all of these things are predicated on gameplay systems that just don't exist in a hero
Psst. Hey, come over here. The thing that makes hero-based shooters interesting in the first place is the context provided by tanks and supports. So we should probably have them able to heal, right? If you don't have healing in your hero-based shooter, the space control doesn't work in the same way. You can't really have high ground matter in the same way, and therefore the maps don't matter in the same way, and therefore the game's shit. It's not really a hero-based shooter at that point. You're just playing. If you put Rem without his healing in Overwatch, and you put another character in and you put Zen in, the game's now an arena-based shooter. It's not a hero-based shooter. It's an arena shooter.
Overwatch doesn't have minions, resources, or that same kind of point of interest-centric map design.
And yes, I agree, it'd be quite interesting to have characters that were able to do stuff like that. I actually think the supportive role there fits more into the DPS or the tank role than it does the supportive role, because support's job in Overwatch is to provide the necessary resources to augment other people, and missing one very important resource, which is the ability to be able to get back into the game in a fast manner after you take damage, is pretty bad for them.
Then again, there are supports in MOBAs that have more generic designs, but I still don't know if those would fit. A common theme is providing overshield and damage buffs, as seen in League of Legends' Lulu and Deadlock's Paige. This is a nice supportive...
I mean, yeah, that's a supportive ability. It's a Zarya build
thing, but I don't think it's enough. In Marvel Rivals, loads of...
I think like he's confusing supportive with support. The difference between supportive characters and support characters isn't necessarily anything, but also it doesn't matter, right? It doesn't really matter, because the roles are there in order to enforce people's understanding of the roles rather than to be prescriptive. They don't necessarily need to be prescriptive in the same way. I think this is a position where I kind of disagree with you. I'd rather fewer heroes were less self-sufficient, like having healing passive being universal has somewhat shifted into who gets what resources, especially what support sub-roles alongside balance, because fighting these heroes no longer grants you the same value. Like Kiriko spends Suzu less often because on average output is higher, meaning she's less likely to use it on herself, which is also done less often because because her healing others heals her. Yes, I agree. I think you're talking about the incentives for people to be able to use their cooldowns in order to do other things apart from just pure peel, right? I definitely think there's a good argument to be made that at a lower mid rank, forcing people to be able like self-nade is a good thing. I don't know really what else you're talking about, because I don't think I was talking about that, but maybe I'm going crazy and I'm not understanding you.
Characters have the ability to give themselves overshield already, and Overwatch tried releasing a support character who didn't heal and instead gave her allies overshield and did other things like leverage area denial tools and help her allies stage in odd locations, and nobody liked her.
And she was a support... nobody liked her. She was a utility character, and she was pure utility. I mean, she's not a support, because support in Overwatch is healing. But, like, you can call Symmetra a support if you want. I don't really care. It doesn't really matter. If you're saying we should have more of those characters, all power to you. I think Rollock makes that a little bit awkward, and it does limit design in quite a few different ways. But however, at the same point, just put them in the DPS character. It's not an issue. Overwatch needs to support doing healing in order to have enough attention on people to generally be able to get people back into the fight in a reasonable amount of time, and therefore be an interesting game, because that's what hero-based shooters are at a fundamental level.
Then you have the question of what the supports are going to be doing moment to moment if not healing. If the answer is combat, then we might just have the identity problem again. You can have
they really weren't happy with what Sim was at launch.
Support freely engaging in combat in a MOBA because combat in that genre can work for different characters in a variety of different ways. Some characters want to click on people, others want to combo their abilities, others teleport on top of you and insta-kill you, others shit in the woods for 15 minutes, but we're talking about a genre of shooter games here, and there are only like 2 ways you can make combat work there. The idea might have some merit in Overwatch.
Talk about diverse poke.
If you wanted to take the idea of just abolishing the role distinction between DPS and support seriously, which I'd say is highly unlikely but not impossible, but other than that, I don't want to say you couldn't make it work, but you'd have to design a hero shooter from the ground up with healing not being core to the role in mind if you wanted to make it distinct. It's just not a solution for the games we have right now.
The support category heals. That's the difference, because you need enough support. You need enough healing in your game in order for the game to be interesting. I really think you're overthinking this.
So if we're stuck with healing, then we're going to have to make it work. We might consider making sure every
needs to turn his
support has
sensitivity down. Yeah, actually, that's probably what's the problem with the aim is.
Something unique that keeps the player engaged, like Jeff's beam, Mercy's mobility, stuff like that. This also isn't an uncommon thing. The Engineer in TF2 is an example that predates the coining of the genre, but it isn't so simple to come up with a purely unique thing for each character. There are things you can repeat and do different takes on. For instance, Mercy has a unique movement style that requires mastery, as does Juno, but that'll only take you so far. Besides, just because it's unique doesn't mean it makes for healthy character design. Wu Yang being able to snipe people around corners is unique, but it also makes him a DPS light character because it requires all of his attention and
And the problems with that are, it's okay to have DPS-like characters. The problem is when you create systems that stops you being able to have non-DPS-like characters.
his kit has literally nothing else going on.
There's nothing wrong with Wu Yang's kit. There's really nothing wrong with the kit in general. The trouble is, Wu Yang exists in a situation which de-incentivizes him to have his passive heal on the right targets and only incentivizes him to be pushing damage, right? Like, this is the issue. And yeah, Wu Yang's always going to be pushing damage, but the problem is also that the system disincentivizes other characters from being able to be used in the passive way.
Anyway, coming up with something wholly unique is far from easy.
Fighting the urge to argue about Wu Yang, yeah, well, the thing is, Wu Yang's not that bad. I think we all can agree Wu Yang's disappointing in that there's no weaknesses in the kit that are interesting, then that can be played around, and the kit's kind of like, I don't know, it's kind of like a beige character in my mind. It's beige. He is bad at all. He is not bad at all, or he's bad at all. The power of the orb when it leaves LOS, I still disagree with that. I think going around corners is fine as a thing. I think it's problematic, but I understand why you're saying that. Wu Yang's easy to tweak into a healthy hero, just a format issue. Exactly, it's just a format issue, and that's the problem with most of Overwatch.
Let alone
and the problem is this guy is not capable of looking at Overwatch as a holistic, like, entire game and the things it could be, because his understanding of 2019 Overwatch was, hey guys, Goat sure existed.
doing it for every support character. So let's look at something we know can work. If we want to have a support who engages in combat, which we do, they make for fun characters, then we should still make sure their kit incorporates a trade-off or a restriction, right?
No, we just can make that as well as the ones that don't. Like we can actually just make some characters that do and some characters that don't, and that's okay.
This one is definitely something developers have lost sight of. Like, what trade-off does Alari have, really?
Yes, I agree.
She has
trade-offs.
2 good heals, decent mobility, a lethal hit scan gun,
She only had, admittedly, Outburst is not a very strong ability until you get your major perk, which I have my own arguments against. Yeah, I agree that people should have weaknesses.
and a powerful offensive ultimate. What more can you ask for? Then in Rivals, White Fox kind of had a trade-off in that her neutral was crap compared to similar support characters, but then they panic buffed her, so... Anyway, the thing with a trade-off, though, is that what the character provides needs to be worth it. Zenyatta in Overwatch is absolutely worth that trade-off. Cord Orb is an extremely potent ability, but then you have cases like Adam Warlock before his mobility buffs, where his kit just didn't offer anything substantial in exchange for his worse healing and utility. Then again, Discord Orb is powerful enough to be worth the trade-off,
Well, no, that's just what it is.
but that's partly because it is awful to play against, especially if you're a tank player. It's basically a magic trick, but instead of pulling a rabbit out of a hat, you look at the enemy tank and make his health bar disappear. What I'm getting at is that developers probably fell off giving their supports meaningful trade-offs because it's kinda hard and they have deadlines. Making sure the trade-off is worth it and not too harsh is a tricky balancing act, and some things...
It's very hard to create a support with trade-off in a game where there are no trade-off for supports. And it's very hard to create a support with trade-off in a game for Overwatch's side where you have to have a certain amount of dueling potential or else you will make a character that's useless, right? Like, there's so many demands on 5v5. You want to make a support with trade-off in 5v5? I'm like, okay, good fucking luck. As much as I hate Snap Kick on Zen, it's 5v5, so I mean, yeah, sure. That's my answer for most of these things. They're doing that needs want at a certain point, and the need of 5v5 is this, and the need of infinite healing sustain and rivals is that. I mean, it is what it is.
that are going to be worth that trade-off are still going to be goddamn awful to play around. This is both a challenge to design and a challenge to balance with the game's shifting meta, but again, that's not an excuse to not try. Something is better than nothing. What kind of trade-off...
And as I don't think he's realized Snap Kick actually has eliminated the majority of Zen's weaknesses at close range.
Would I give, for example...
Which I just ignored because I just assumed, again, that he knew about it. He might not even know that it does extra damage.
Lari? I don't really know. But to close out, there is an idea I want to put forward. A reoccurring issue I see with supports in hero
Why is he always aiming in front of the person when he plays Moira?
shooters is what I'm going to call fight-to-heal design. This is where a support has to engage in combat in some way in order to heal their team, like with Moira's or Mizuki's resource meters, or Brigitte's rally passive in Overwatch. The reason this is an issue is because if you want to tie a support's ability to heal to their ability to do damage, they need to be built to do damage, and the more they're built to do damage, the more they can ignore supporting their team in favor
I
of.
thought you liked Mizuki.
You can make this work. Mizuki, barring his one perk that I think pushes his offensive power just a little bit over the line, is an example, but it's another tricky balancing act.
But what's the problem? We're designing diverse characters in the game. It's okay to have some more passive ones and some more aggressive ones. Maybe you're just not playing the passive characters.
However, we might...
Yeah, Brig isn't built to deal damage. Yeah, she's straight up not built to deal damage. She's built to force her to continuously interact with the enemy team in order to be active. But that's just to reinforce her playstyle.
be able to skirt this issue altogether. There is a support character in Paladins named Furia, and she is so spectacular that I am genuinely shocked she hasn't been ripped off yet. Furia is an aggressive-leaning support. Ignoring the game's talent and loadout system, her only heal is her single-target right-click. However, her offensive tools
Okay, so she's a off-tank.
first seem to be unimpressive. She has a stun, some okay mobility, and a really weak primary.
So she's an off-tank, okay?
But then you notice her passive. By healing her allies, Furia builds up her resource meter, which in turn increases the fire rate of her primary. This is how she does damage, and how you get the most out of her kit. Rather than fighting to heal, she heals to fight. It's the opposite of how these other supports work, and Furia...
And I have no problem with a tank being able to do a heal. Like, I've got no problem with that.
functions amazingly. She can't just ignore her team to DPS, so she has a distinct identity, but at the same time, she's not wholly...
Yeah, and this character is more of a support because, again, this character right here isn't themselves trading resources in order to be able to do pressure on the enemy team like a tank does. So this is a supportive character, but that's really the only difference. Like, you have a spectrum down from the ability to trade resources for pressure, and then you've got the lower end where you're forcing other people to do that.
Dependent on her team.
And yeah, off tanks have like a bit of two, right? They have the ability to be able to support and the ability to be able to control space, and there's no real barriers between these things. You can be a supportive character, and that's the thing. The only difference really that concretely does it is the tendency, and that's fine. It's just fine. The roles are just there to reinforce some kind of like semblance or a regular team comp, and so that new players know what the fuck is happening.
She's not beholden to her team to give her opportunities. She can shoot, hit her stuns, and engage all on her own.
Zarya.
She just can't do so without also doing her role's job. Now, this wouldn't work with
doing her role's job. I mean, is it really a problem with Mizuki there? Is it really a problem with Illari there? Yeah, sure. Maybe Illari and Mizuki should have a little bit more impulse in their kit to have to be able to shove things, their right click on their DPS a little bit more and get the lamp up. Sure, but like, I don't think people are really having a problem with people not doing that. That's not the issue.
Without Paladins' other systems. The global anti-healing system causes supports to noticeably fall off in the late game, so we skirt the DPS but better issue, but it doesn't lead to the supports feeling useless either. The talent and loadout system allows them to provide additional utility to their teams or gain additional offensive power to fill in the gaps. Now,
by the way, a hero-based shooter having a progressive cauterized system with supporting falling off over the course of the game sounds like the worst thing in the world. I have, by the way, played Paladins on stream. It just sounds like the worst thing in the world. I don't want to be more utility as time goes on. It just, what's the point in that? I want a character that is good in and of themselves.
Am I saying every hero shooter should turn themselves into Paladins? Yes.
Supports with hard resources that limit their damage and healing are interesting, but supports whose limit is the opportunity cost of their attention are also interesting. 100% Tiefling. It's not a no, not this, I want this. It's a yes and. Right? Yes, yeah, sure, and right, like I'm not mocking you for your ideas. I'm just saying there's no reason you can't also have these things. And the reason why everything's out of whack in both of these games is the format and the overall gameplay balance, not the individual heroes. There's no problem with the individual heroes. There never has been for the most part. Well, there obviously is outliers. Don't get me wrong, but there's not a systemic problem with the individual heroes.
No. The supports in Paladins had their own storied history and jank, but
yes,
what
that's
I'm
true.
saying...
I didn't experience it before beginner level, so I am talking out my my ass, as you have kindly pointed out. No problem with that, Melenzi.
Is that the developers found something that worked for them and made the role feel distinct and impactful. Paladins had my favorite support experience out of any hero shooter I've played. Landing a fat stun as Ceres, moving around and repositioning Luna as Io, juggling Marks as Corvus, all ideas we've seen before, but
peace.
Paladins I think really pulled them off, and there's something we can learn from their success. Implementing a basic heal-to-fight design philosophy may be an important step in making the supports in other games work, whether we're talking about supports who don't engage enough, or the ones who engage in combat too much. There's more I could talk about, like the difference of implementation in Paladins' and Overwatch's anti-healing systems and the effects that might have on each game's supports, and we can argue back and forth some more about how much anybody should actually care about things like Illari being basically a DPS character or the supports in Rivals being kinda dry, but if I wanted to keep going, this video would never come out. Sorry again for rambling, this is just a topic I feel like I could talk about for hours, and maybe I will someday, but that was never supposed to be the point of this video. I'm gonna admit, this one kinda got away from me a bit, hence the delay, but now that we're here, I want to ask you something. What do you want out of a support?
I want them to have the agency to be able to damage or support and have the biggest diversity and that spectrum in the game. I want a lot of agency in their ability to be able to heal in their base kit and support without a massive portion of every single one of their comments being just cooldowns. Sorry, I'm reading Rode telling me to comment on this video. without a massive portion of their value being cooldowns, I don't want every part of their kit just being an override thing. I want the things to be augmented by support. I don't want them to be overwritten by support, either healing numbers or healing cooldowns. I don't want either of those things happening. I want all engagements to be as layered and interesting as possible in the game. And I think that support's DPSing and support's being more DPS focused is an interesting addition to the types of things that can happen. I want both rivals to drop. And by the way, I would literally play rivals. I'm not a rivals hater, like through and through. Obviously, I don't think their hero designs are quite as good as the ones in Overwatch in general, but they've got some cool stuff in there. Quite a lot of the time, they're moving too fast and not cleaning up. But the problem is the gameplay shit. It's just bad. It's just actively bad. Their healing's too high, the ultimates do too much, the DPS do too much in terms of insta-kill, it's too sharp, and the supports as a response do too much in terms of their instant peel. If you changed all that, I would play rivals, because the game would actually be in a healthy state. It would have a good flow to it. And yeah, there'll still be problems, but then you have the opportunity of being able to shuffle it up and down, because that allows you the space to be able to do all those things I just said. And in Overwatch, I want the DPS passive gone. I want the game in 6v6. I want the tanks, armor, and health pools to be appropriately scaled, because if that does not happen, then healing cannot be as independently impactful as it once was. If you fix all that, I still want to play rifles because I want 120 FPS. Very good. Paladins had a different flow and positioning, which allowed players to decourt with cover or abilities. Because of the duration of court rise 1.5 seconds, specifically tuned so you can play around it while allowing every weapon type in the game to keep it applied during combat. In Overwatch, you can't play around anti-heal, and the game wasn't designed with it. I enjoyed Marvel Rivals until I ran out of things to enjoy, 100%. It's fun to learn new kits. Like, if I downloaded Rivals now, right, with all the new kits and Rivals, I have played it for what did I say? It was like 6 or 7 hours that I went back and played it. It was about probably about 6 months ago now, so I played it not recently, but relatively recently. I would enjoy it for 20 hours. Yeah, I'd enjoy it for 20 hours. There's loads of things to learn, loads of things to try, loads of new characters, loads of new gameplay loops. I don't deny that they probably have some very interesting hero concepts. The dinosaur sounds fun. It sounds fun to bullshit. I heard he kidnaps people in the same way that Emma kidnaps people. Man, that would be fun. But I'm not playing that shit. I'm not playing it. It's awful gameplay flow. And the same with 5v5 Overwatch. I'm not playing tank because it's awful. I have
Personally,
standards.
I want the core of the experience to be about supporting my team. I find that fun and gratifying.
Okay, but I want the most diverse support role that is possible, and that includes both.
But what about you? If you're a support player, do you just want something easy? Do you want something different? Do you just want to play a character that can heal? And if you aren't a support player, what do you think they should be? I sincerely want to know. So, I'm really struggling to end this video right now, so here are some things my family jokingly suggested over dinner.
You talk to your family about Marvel Rivals and hero-based shooter design? Jesus Christ, man.
I come not to praise Caesar, but to bury him.
Okay, wasn't about Rivals.
I have a very particular set of skills. Good afternoon, good evening, and good night.
How does this go on for another 2 minutes?
Okay, we're back with another end of video notes.
This is the ramble. Okay, I'm gonna stop at the ramble here. Yeah, so it's pretty clear to me personally, and I hope I'm not misrepresenting this guy, that he doesn't really understand the history of the hero-based shooter genre in quite as much depth as he needs to. He wasn't able to identify strong healing being a problem in general in Rivals, apart from passingly. And he misattributed the problem to aggressive support design, creating triple support somehow, despite the fact that it's clearly not what's happening in Rivals in and of itself. Is characters that have incredibly large levels of healing and incredibly aggressive support output at exactly the same time, because Luna Snow's just, let's face it, just the baby of the community. And he's unable to talk about Overwatch properly because his opinions of 222 Overwatch and old Overwatch before Season 9 was tainted by basically just his knowledge of goats. If you went back, and I really do, if you do watch this on Phoenix, go back and play Overwatch Classic next time it's out. Overwatch Classic is an experience that if you just transplant that with some of the jank removed and with 5 more characters in the support and tank role, just select the ones you want. Damn, it's a good experience. It's just a good experience. Now, we've gone a long way away from that, and the reason we went away from that, I'm going to be honest, it's a shit move to 5v5 created by the necessity to release Overwatch 2, and then the doubling down on that over the last couple of years.